I would like to call to order the Hingham School Committee meeting of November 20th, 2017 at 7:31 p.m. And our first item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on October 23rd, 2017.
Do I have a second? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. And I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the school committee meeting held on November 6th, 2017.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Don't jump up.
Yeah, don't jump.
First.
Any comments or discussion?
Yes, I'd like to draw your attention to 6.5. If I can find the right minute. Wrong one?
Yep. They're educators?
6.5. Excuse me, 6.3.
Say it must be.
And the last sentence, I would just like to change that last phrase to was reflective of a majority of the individual evaluations.
I think it's 6.4.
3, it's 6.3.
6.3.
It's 6.3. Got it.
What's that?
You know what, Ed? I don't really agree with that. Because I did look at every single evaluation, and I used words from every single evaluation in writing that. So,
Let's see what this
even,
Well,
It has to be also reflective of all of us.
right,
Can you
Correct?
phrase it differently? Could you say,
could you say
Included-
all individual
included.
evaluations as opposed to all 7, but, I mean,
included
it,
components of all 7
Yeah.
evaluations?
yeah.
instead of saying reflective, I think that would solve
Yeah,
your
you'd
problem,
say
Ed. I think it's the
components
word
of.
reflective that's causing you the problem in
Yep.
all likelihood.
What was that?
I
alter-
can go with, the summary document was, or included components of all 7 individual evaluations.
Fair enough.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so,
I'll make a motion to approve the November 6, 2017 school committee meeting minutes with the revisions just proposed.
So moved.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. 3, questions and comments. Audience comments are always welcome as agenda items are discussed. Does anyone have anything not on the agenda that they would like to share with us? Okay, thank you. So number 4, superintendent's report.
Thank you. I do want to comment on the 2 forums that we had last week with respect to concerns about kindergarten and the enrollment age, and I thought both of them were well attended and went well, and we appreciate people who came. We also appreciate that a number of people wrote statements, mostly in the form of emails, and they are all here for school committee review. If you haven't already seen them, some came from different two different people, but we have them all now collected in a folder and they're available for review. I would say as of Thursday, which was the day after the Wednesday evening forum, we already had a communication from one of the preschool directors. As you remember, if you were at the forums, they did commit to wanting to work together to get some more information out to parents, and already we're reaching out to the principals so that we can set up a date in the very near future where we can have a forum that is particularly looking at getting out more information about two things. The kindergarten curriculum, so people have accurate information in front of them about what the curriculum really is, and also about expectations in terms of readiness skills. And those forums will involve the various preschool directors in our town, and in addition, Hingham administrators and teachers. There seemed to be a lot of interest in hearing what teachers themselves have to say. So those are in the process of being set up. I know that Cynthia plans to say something later in the agenda about the decision-making process, but we're, regardless, moving forward with getting that information out, and it will be put on the website as anything else appropriate seems to come along. That will be put there as well. Second thing, under good news, you know, I was thinking the other day when we had all-town PTO, and the different PTO presidents were commenting on their recent events, and some of those were social events, some of them were fundraising events, and I don't have in front of me the total number of dollars, but it was significant what our PTOs raised for us, and not just in terms of money, but the volunteerism and all the good things they do for us, but mainly because of and for the kids. So as we think about this week and Thanksgiving, you know, we have a lot of thanks to give to a lot of people, and I'll start with the PTOs, but of course we have our foundation, we have the Hingham Sports Partnership, we have CPAC, we have the various booster groups, and mainly we have the citizens of this town who've always supported the schools to the extent that they think is appropriate, and I always say I think we get our fair share of what is available, which isn't always enough, but is available. So a lot of thanks to a lot of people, but in particular to the PTOs. They're a big part of what we do here in terms of communication, and I told them they should get some credit for all that they do, and rather than send it out in the next two message, which only goes to my 5,000 nearest and dearest friends, but rather in a meeting that is televised. And so we say thank you to everybody that is there supporting us, our staffs, and our and mainly the students, because it really is all about what people do for kids. So.
Yes, thank you to all of them, and many of us here were very active in the PTOs ourselves, so we know what all of those, now working on them actively, are in all that they contribute to our schools, and thank you.
And in terms of the dollars, we should mention, less people think at home that we got a lot of dollars that are just extra. All of those dollars, there's no administrative overhead in any of those dollars, and they go back to things like field trips and special activities and speakers and all kinds of good things to enhance the program. So every last dollar is raised for kids, and it's spent for kids, and no overhead.
Okay, great. Communications?
Two things I would mention. One is there's a copy of a complimentary parent letter about a preschool teacher. I frequently put those kinds of things in the packet for school committee to see. It's the end of your packet. The second thing, I want to mention again that the communications about the kindergarten discussion are available. Some of you have read them, but they're in our folder. And did we decide we're going to put them in a log, Cynthia, or what are we going to do to make sure that?
I have.
You have a log?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. I think you had something.
Yes, I just wanted to share with the committee and people at home. Lane Lambert, who was the Patriot Ledger reporter, has retired, and Mary Whitfill has taken his place. And I met with her last week. She called me just to introduce herself and just hear what was going on, off the record conversation, and I went through our goals with her, And she also met with Dr. Gallo today, just introductory and to fill her in on
And
what's
she's
happening.
actually here tonight.
Oh, Mary, oh, there she is. So you will be seeing more of her and around the community. And she's covering Hingham, not just the school committee, but all of Hingham, so, and various other towns. So we welcome you to our community and our beat, but just so that all of you are aware of the new reporter. So, and did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, our student communications. Emma?
During this past Saturday, the high school hosted their annual holiday fair, and we would like to say it was pretty successful. Also, from a sports standpoint, the only fall sports still going are two cross-country girls, Caroline Johannes and Jackie Harrington, who qualified for states for cross-country and will be running. On the 15th of November, the high school had a class-wide America Recycles Day. On this day, every teacher incorporated a lesson around staying green. For example, some teachers did a paper-free class. On November 16th, a random few went to CMAS, or the Southeastern Massachusetts Association of Student Council, where they learned how to create a better school environment and establish better leadership they could demonstrate to their peers. The Play Chicago, performed Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, was outstanding, bringing in large audiences every night. Also, different sports teams, clubs, and groups have been supporting one another at their performances or events or games. For example, the football team went to the Play Chicago and supported the Drama Kids, and they also had gone to a previous girls' soccer game, and at the end of it, they made a tunnel for all of us to run through. This 3-day school week brings us at the high school Spirit Week. Monday was Jersey Day, Tuesday is Hawaiian Day, and Wednesday is Hingham Day. And after school on Wednesday, we have a pep rally to get us excited for the big football game at 7:45 at Fenway. So hopefully everyone can join us for that. Have a good long weekend and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Okay. On to new business. 6.1, to act on the ratification of the proposed memorandum of agreement with the Administrators Association, and Mary Power, Chair of the Selectmen, is joining us for the ratification vote as is required. So this will be a 8-person vote, and Aileen is going to give us a summary of the agreement.
Yes, so this is the agreement with the Administrators Association. It's a 3-year contract covering fiscal years 2018 to 2020. It includes an equity adjustment at the top step in keeping with market conditions that the administration has been experiencing with new hires. And then it also includes a 2% increase across the board in each of 3 years. It formalizes a new column for a bachelor degree for the athletic director, and it also adjusts the parental leave provisions in the contract to be consistent with the changes that were already made in the teacher's contract that was executed earlier this year.
So may we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we ratify the memorandum of agreement that has already been ratified by the Administrators Association as it appears in our packets.
Okay, second. Any further discussion, questions? No? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mary, for joining us. Okay. 6.2, to receive the Plymouth River School Improvement Plan for 2017-2018 and an update of 2016-2017 plan progress. And Melissa Smith, our brand-new principal, Plymouth River School, is going to, and her team are here to take us through the report. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's been a very smooth start to the school year at Plymouth River, and it's been really exciting to reflect on past practices, along with traditions that have been with us for many years, but also having the opportunity to reflect on that and look forward to the future with some new goals. So tonight I'm excited to present an update on the 2016-17 school improvement plan, along with some of the new goals that we have for this year. With me tonight is Charlene Fabrizio, our assistant principal. And I'd like to start with our mission statement. The mission of the Plymouth River School community, where children are treasured, is to foster a love of learning in an innovative, cooperative climate which empowers all students to be competent, productive, caring, and responsible citizens. I have listed here some people to thank. Last year, our school council members, and also on the right, this year's school council members. We are, since we have a captive audience at home, I'm still looking for a community rep if anyone is interested. And I also want to say that we did, even though we have our members listed, we had additional input, and I would like to say thank you to Charlene as the assistant principal for contributing to this plan, our school committee liaison, Ed, the PRS staff, literacy and math specialists have a large role in this plan, the PTO, and new this year, I've been meeting with members of the CPAC, and a couple of the action steps have come out of those meetings as well. So these are our 3 goals. I'll just jump into the first one here, the adoption of the new literacy program, Journeys. So some of the action steps that we took, we had K-5 teacher full-day workshops. The administrative team and reading specialists met with each grade level to discuss what was going well, as well as some of the challenges with the new program. We had multiple staff meetings so that we could talk about the vertical alignment and discuss some of the challenges. So if a different grade level was having success in that area, they could share with the entire staff how they were able to work on that. And of course, classroom observations and feedback from the administrators. That goal was completed. We had great success with that, and by the end of the year, the teachers were figuring out ways to weave in. They were feeling more comfortable with the program and weaving some of the literacy standards into science and social studies lessons as well. Goal 2 was also completed, and it focused on a STEAM initiative and the next generation science standards. We reviewed, this was our, I believe, 2nd or 3rd year with our STEAM week, and we reviewed activities from the past and talked about the structure and what we needed to tweak for the following year. We identified new funding sources. The activities varied. They were classroom-based, run by teachers. We had specialists, the art, gym, music, librarian. They all had their own STEAM activities planned. We had grade-wide presentations where we had outside experts come in and present to a whole grade level. And then we extended the offerings to 12 after-school offerings, which there was a waiting list ready to get in, and a one nighttime event for all families, which was a huge success. And that was run by our math specialist, Jessica Kitchen. We also developed additional activities and expanded after-school offerings. That was new last year. I'm sorry, I'm just going to go back. So the outcome, again, it was a success measured by feedback from teachers, parents, students, and next year it won't be necessarily a goal, but it will be in an action step to accomplish academic excellence for all with the computer science immersion model. So here's just a snippet of our STEAM week. It was conducted during the week of May 31st to June 3rd, and a listing of our committee that helped put together this wonderful week. And the third goal, also completed, was targeted math support in grade 2. So we had a pretty intense referral process, which we had pre-assessments to determine decision-making for placement. We focused on number sense, so the groups were basically just revisiting gaps that had to do with computation, problem solving, and just various strategies. The math specialists, the teachers, and the paras collaborated to accomplish this goal. It was an additional instruction period outside of their math time, and it was early in the morning. It was during school time, but it was right when they got into school. We had mid-year and end-of-the-year assessments to determine the effectiveness of the program, and we were also able to expand it to grade 3. So the outcome, we had 7 students in grade 2 and 7 students in grade 3. All showed significant growth. The score was out of 20, and for the pre-assessment, most scored in the 4 range, and by the end, they were scoring in the, I'd say, 15 to 19 range, so significant growth. Okay. So our goals for this coming school year, the first is just overall academic excellence. So to provide high quality instruction and assessment that addresses individual student needs and focuses on closing achievement gaps using innovative techniques. Some of the action steps that we are hoping to accomplish, and some of them are already in place. We have analyzed multiple assessments to determine a plan of action for curriculum gaps, to determine subgroup growth and achievement, and to make a plan of action for high growth and high achievement for all students. We are working on using technology to foster different learning styles and also to assess students differently. We're looking to increase professional development to support differentiated instruction, and that can be in-house as well as outside workshops. So we will dedicate a few staff meetings to differentiate instruction, and some teachers have gone outside to some workshops already this year on this specific topic. We are continuing to provide literacy support in K-5, and that is in class by the classroom teacher during RTI, which is small homogeneous groups, and there's also a small morning group for each grade level as a tier 3. We are really excited to introduce math tiered support in grade 5, and hoping that that pilot will expand to all grades. And with my math background, I was really excited to bring this. I feel like we have a great program in place for literacy, and I'm hoping to model math after that. We also have a pilot going in grades K and 4, and that's the math workshop model, and several teachers I purchased a book for them to read, and they have received coaching from the math specialists and have gone to visit other classrooms who use the math workshop model, and they already have that up and running, which is wonderful. And we are continuing all math supports, which we have had in the past: Extra Math, Math Olympics, the Math Coaching, and Math Plus, which both are provided by the math specialist. Goal 2 is to create a safe learning environment by focusing on the social emotional well-being of all students to foster academic achievement. And as you know, this is a district-wide goal, and it's important to me as well, so I thought it would be a great goal to have for the school. We had a very successful opening day, so we've never had this before, so it was the first annual, so now I'm dedicated to doing it next year. We called it a sneak peek, and it was for students to come and check out their classroom and just to relieve some of the anxiety and stress on returning to school. So it's a very happy day for all, and lots of positive feedback from parents on that. We have monthly themes that are communicated in the newsletters that I send out during all school meetings, and new this year we have morning announcements. So just to give you an example, September focused on polite, responsible, safe, which has always been the motto of Plymouth River. October was helping others. November was celebrating differences, and to me, I stress the importance of not just accepting differences, but celebrating it, and tying that into the book Wonder with the movie coming out, and the students really were excited to do that. And then going into next month, we're focusing on being grateful. We're expanding some professional development on social emotional topics and, again, outside workshops along with the professional development that we have already in place for teachers. We're revisiting the office referral procedures so that it focuses on it's a teaching opportunity rather than a negative consequence. And promoting the district-wide social emotional surveys and analyzing the data to take proactive measures and planning interventions. So we're, as you know, in the middle of that, we've had a very high return on our surveys, and I think that that's wonderful because if we didn't, we wouldn't have a lot of data to go on. So I'm excited to get that data back and see what our next steps will be. Just a couple photos here. The top left, that's from an all-school meeting, and they were singing a song about helping others, which was our theme. The bottom left is a gift card drive. We helped a school in Houston that I had a personal connection with and got in contact with the principal, and we were able to raise $2,500 in gift cards to send over to that school that was severely affected by the hurricane. And top right is a morning meeting. Goal 3 is to promote and maintain a school culture which embraces a not just homeschool, but homeschool community connection. So I have teamed up with the PTO to just streamline communication to families. So I now have a paragraph or 2 or 3, depending on how talkative I feel that week. And so the communication has been streamlined, and that goes out to families each Monday. I've created a weekly newsletter for staff, and we have a shared calendar, and it's really made us an efficiently run school. We are reviewing we just talked about it today at School Council, reviewing the PRS website, and specifically finding information with ease and ensuring that all information is up to date. Continuing partnerships with local media and other groups, and we have already have a great partnership with HCAM, but we're looking to expand beyond that. And our 5th graders, they have a community service program with the senior center, and the mothers who are running the community service program have expanded it to, I think, 4 or 5 partnerships, and such as an animal shelter and some other senior groups. And each month, I've done this in the past, and I will continue it, monthly slideshows that are highlighting all the different learning going on in the school. And here's a couple from a recent field trip. I took 10 kids after school to HCAM, and in the top left, they're having fun with the green screen. In the middle there, they're using the editing tools. And then on the right was before the field trip. I run an after-school club that is called the PRS News Crew, and they're using the equipment that was purchased through HCAM. And so we use the camera, and they practice interviewing skills, writing scripts, and editing. So it's always fun with that group. And just recently we had a Veterans Day tribute. So this was the first annual Veterans Day tribute at PRS, and it was wonderful. We had a great turnout. And way over to the right, you can see the young man who recently returned to Hingham, and Hingham welcomed him with such a wonderful welcome back to Hingham. So he attended with his parents, and it was a really nice presentation. And some of the other, you can see that the veterans group was there. Keith German was there, along with some other people in the photo were dads, uncles, cousins. So it was a nice event to bring family members who are veterans. And that brings me to the end. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions? Comments? Oh, yeah.
I was thinking about this the other day, maybe because we're going into budget season. But is there anything at the school that if you had more resources, you would do what?
I know. Where do I begin?
You don't have to answer right now, but maybe I was thinking about that. Like,
Well,
is there something that you said, I wish we could do this at the school?
we're really going towards the computer science, really digging deeper into the computer science standards. And I was talking today to the tech specialist, and we were saying how wonderful it would be to have a computer science or STEAM room or carts or something along those lines. So we're in the middle of writing a grant for that right now. So that was top of my list.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have a question. So you had mentioned that the PRS website was discussed at a recent school council meeting. I would love to get the feedback from that meeting if I could, because you talked about were they able to find information with ease. Something we're currently discussing, so you don't have to tell me tonight, but if you could just give me a summary, or if that's going to be continued to be discussed, I would love to just find out more, because that feedback would be great for the community outreach.
Okay, we'll do. We did discuss a couple changes today, but that will be in the works until the next meeting. But I will send you the update on that.
That would be great, thank you.
And also, just so everyone knows, our school council minutes from today are up on the website.
Okay.
So if you can find them, if they're easy to find.
That'll be the test. Great. Anyone else? Oh, thank you, Melissa. I would just like to, for the community, Plymouth River was a commendation school, level 1 school last year, and was honored at the State House along with South School. So we are very proud of all the work that happened last year and continues
Thank
to
you
go
very much.
on. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. 6.3, to hear a report on MCAS testing from spring of 2017. And Dr. Jamie is going to take us through how Hingham did on the new MCAS.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm a little under the weather, so I apologize in advance for my voice. It's a long weekend. That's right, Liza. So tonight is to give an overview of our performance on the 2017 administration of the next generation MCAS, but as well as the legacy MCAS for our performance both in science as well as at the high school level. So the presentation this evening has 5 parts. The first will be an overview of just general district accountability information for this coming year. And part 2 will then get into a brief overview of the next generation MCAS. So as you know, this past spring was the first year we administered the new MCAS after almost a 20-year legacy design. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time sort of explaining, giving a little bit of context to the scores. We'll then dive into our results for all students. And because the new assessment establishes effectively a new baseline, we do not have historical comparisons that we usually would have included in the report for you. So what we did this year was we took our 21 benchmark communities, because Concord-Carlisle is a high school district, but in fact Concord and Carlisle both operate as independent elementary districts. So we look at both Concord and Carlisle as well as our other traditional 19 benchmark communities. And so we have a comparison of our performance against our benchmark peers. And then we get into the results of both our high needs and special education subgroups, and again, do the comparison with our benchmark communities. And again, that is because of the new design, and we do not have the ability to do historical comparisons. And then we'll conclude with next steps to give you some sense of the data analysis, unpacking, and action planning that's to come based off these results. And I will mention that there is a far more comprehensive 90-plus page written report that all of you have at your places that looks like this. We'll also post a copy online. I don't like to read the more detailed report that has each grade level gets far more in depth on question types and our performance compared against the state. So let's first start with accountability information. Because last spring was the first time we were administering the new assessment, we were essentially held harmless relative to overall accountability ratings. So that being said, of our 6 schools, the only school who received a performance level was Hingham High School, and that is because they administered the legacy design, so it allowed them to make historical comparisons. And Hingham High School is a level 1 high school. That said, they performed at the 95th percentile, which means their achievement was as well, they did as well or better than 95% of high schools across the Commonwealth. And again, because of the health harmless provision under Every Student Succeeds Act and our implementation here in Massachusetts, no other schools received a percentile ranking. So again, this for 2017 accountability year, we are still a level 2 school district because it reverts back to the overall designation, but the only individual school who received a rating was Hingham High School, and they were at the 95th percentile. Next, let's talk a little bit about what the next generation MCAS looked like. So first off, it updated a nearly 20-year-old MCAS assessment. So in 20 years, we were essentially giving the same assessment. The new assessment, however, focuses more on critical thinking abilities, application of knowledge, and the ability to make connections between both what kids have read and their written output. Generally speaking, it's said to give a clearer signal of readiness for the next grade or for college and career. And it's designed to be given on a computer, although paper versions still remain available for those districts who have opted to take a paper and pencil. You'll remember that last spring, our 4th and 8th grade took it online, and this coming spring, grades 3 through 8 will take it online. Let's start at the top. So first off, the new MCAS has new achievement levels, new sort of qualitative descriptors of student performance. You'll remember on the legacy, and that's the new term, by the way, for the old MCAS, they're referring to as the legacy design versus next generation design. Under legacy, we had 4 performance levels: advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning. Under the next generation assessment, we are looking at, again, 4 performance levels, but they're not one-to-one correspondences, right? So it's not everybody who was advanced is now exceeding expectations, and we'll explain a little bit about the standard setting that occurred where we got our new performance bands from. So the new performance levels are exceeding expectation, and that is a student who performed at that level has essentially exceeded grade level expectation by just demonstrating a level of mastery of the subject matter. We have meeting expectations, which refer to a student's performance where they met grade level expectation and is academically on track to succeed in the current grade in that subject. Partially meeting expectations is a student who performed at that level partially met the grade level expectations in the subject, and not meeting expectations where the student did not meet the grade level expectation for that content area. I wanted to share with you a sample parent score report. So parents in grades 4 through 9 this year would have received these several weeks ago in the mail, and you would have gotten one for PreK as well as for mathematics. And so this is just a sample that actually shows what parents would have received when they got their score reports. So what you'll note here is the student's performance in math is sort of pictured by a little triangle that shows you where under the 4 performance ratings the student performed, as well as the confidence interval band. That's the gray little bar that says, 95% confidence that the actual score fell somewhere between these 2 points, and that's the gray versus the blue triangle. The flip side of the report also goes on to talk to you about the actual strands and where the student got or missed points relative to those strands. Those revisions to the descriptors, the new standards for meeting expectations are more rigorous than what used to be in place for receiving an advanced score. Massachusetts educators actually set the standard, which is which was a new piece of work for the state to engage in. So rather than administering the test, looking at raw scores, figuring out cut scores, and then corresponding raw score to scale scores, the state actually had a group of educators who worked over the summer with the content in the exam and looking at the results, and actually set criterion reference points of if you need to have known this much to sort of have met expectations for this grade. So structurally, they've sort of created more rigorous design in the assessment, but Massachusetts educators are the ones who actually set the standard of where the cuts actually were for performance on the MCAS, or the next generation MCAS. They were projecting that our next generation results would look more aligned with our state's performance on the NAEP, or the National Assessment for Educational Performance, and less like our legacy results. If you'll note, on the left-hand side, that looks at our Massachusetts' performance on the 2015 NAEP, again, which is the National Assessment of Educational Performance. On the right, what you'll note is this sort of up and down, right, with performance across grades. And so the old legacy MCAS, because it was built sort of in a silo for a particular grade, there was no coherence from 3 through 8, right? So your performance in grade 3 really had no bearing or predictive ability on your performance in grade 4, right? They were looked at as a silo in isolation of this is grade 3. The new assessment actually is more aligned with our performance of the NAEP. And that is also true that the scores, for example, in 3rd grade are now more predictive of a student's success in grade 4. Does that make sense? So there's now more coherence across the grades. The results, however, what you'll note, and this was a projected performance, what you'll note is the exceeding expectation mark is the green in the bar chart there. And you'll note that that is sort of proportionally smaller than what we saw under the old legacy MCAS performance. And what's important to note here is the results do not mean that anybody or any of our students have learned less. What it means is that we're measuring their performance in a different way. And that's why we keep referring to this as a baseline year, because they've essentially sort of reset the scale by which we gauge and measure student performance. 2017 was the baseline. It was the first year of the new assessment, and it is expected that performance will grow and improve over time, just as it did in '98 when the legacy MCAS first appeared. So sort of progressively over time since 1998, we have seen incremental increases in performance every year since initial inception. The same will hold true, or they're projecting the same will hold true for the new next generation assessment, in that performance over time will improve and increase. And that is once students have an understanding of the expectations, once teachers have an understanding of the assessment, we predict the performance will increase. Any questions so far about the recalibration or the new assessment design?
You want me to ask them now, or?
Well, if you'd like, before, I think it might make sense before we get into the scores, if you'd like to, if it's about
Yes,
test
so
design.
I'm actually, yes. So I have a few questions. I'm not a fan, and I think a lot of people in this community will know how I stand about Common Core, and I know that because of our adapting of the Common Core standards, that's one reason why we have MCAS 2.0. What I'm kind of interested in is PreK was the test that was supposed to substitute any previous tests across the nation, and it was declined because it failed and people didn't like the PreK test. So they now created a new test called MCAS 2.0. What I'm kind of curious as to know is, what's the difference between PreK and MCAS 2.0?
I think you'd have to ask the Commonwealth that question.
Yeah, and I don't think you could even answer that question, but I
Sure.
think it's a really interesting question to ask, because I feel like MCAS 2.0 is just a new branding of PreK. They're just kind of calling it a different thing. I mean, it's really, really important for parents to understand, because especially during the discussions we recently had with kindergarten, some of the statements made by parents was about curriculum. Like, oh my gosh, you know, the curriculum in our schools nowadays, and people really need to understand that that curriculum is new, and we've been, you know, we adopted it back in 2010, I believe, but it's, you know, it's taken a time to get there, and that's where we are now. And so I'm just, you can't answer that tonight, but that is one question I have. What's the difference between PreK and MCAS 2.0? So my second question would be, you talked about exceeding expectations. So obviously they must be testing beyond the grade level, correct? In order to know whether a child's exceeding, sorry, just to explain my question.
Sure.
In order to understand that a child's exceeding expectations, you almost have to test beyond the grade level, or am I wrong in making that assumption?
I don't know that I don't know that it's that specific as grade level. I think what they're assessing is skill, and sort of the higher level, or the higher order application is what they're getting at. And so the new sort of scoring system has sort of a variety of point values, right? So you can get a 3 or a 4. Whereas before it was sort of binary, it was right or it wasn't, where now there's sort of additional points, particularly in writing for, and Mary, help me out, our director of English is here. But the Right. So what they did was, and again, the educators in the Commonwealth sort of went in and looked and said, to be meeting the expectation, here's where we see the sort of expected performance to be. But if you performed above that, it would be exceeding. It's not necessarily saying you're at the next grade level. It's that you evidenced a higher level application of the skill or the knowledge that exceeded the expectation of what it meant to be sort of proficient at that grade level. Does that make sense? So they weren't assessing different grade level content standards. They were addressing the extent to which, again, it's a more rigorous assessment of synthesis and application than just regurgitation. So they were looking at sort of higher level application, the connection between taking multiple sources and then producing a written text that synthesizes it at a higher level, and that's where they got the exceeding expectation from it. It's not necessarily they got the scores in third grade that a fourth grader would get. It's that as a third grader, their application of those skills was above and beyond the expectation for that grade.
I'm going to trust the educator, but yeah, it is frustrating because when you hear the term rigorous,
yeah,
it's really not a nice word. As a parent, we are #1 in the state of Massachusetts, nationwide with our education.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of parents, when they saw some of the newspaper articles coming out about this new test and seeing the scores, just so you have an idea of the feelings, is why are we making this all more rigorous? And I know that's not anything about your job.
Sure.
My complaint really is to the DESE and
Fair enough.
needs to go up higher, but I think it's important that parents kind of understand that too when we talk about this new test, because I know the scores can be confusing, and I do want to understand more about what's the difference between the old test and the new test, and,
Right.
and also PARC, like, is it really any different than PARC? So.
Sure. But I appreciate that those questions, and hopefully it illustrated some points for people at home too. And that's a great, Cynthia. Sorry.
Sorry, you can finish.
No, that's a great segue actually, but go ahead.
Just quickly, you said, there was one thing you said, and now it was a while ago, about how the scores are predictive of how the child will do next year.
Well, they're better aligned. We have a better picture.
Okay, but
Yeah.
my point is it, just to clarify, due on the test next year or due in school next year?
Well, I think it's
I just don't want people to get all freaked out.
Sure. No. I'm sorry. So the response would be meeting the grade level expectation
Okay.
for the next year.
Okay.
Or actually, it's reflective of that past year. But given the new work to build coherence across 3 to 8, they're saying the added benefit. Not only does it give a good representation of what was mastered at a more, and I know you don't like this word, but at a more rigorous level, it also is a better indicator of performance in the next grade level, and the teachers really are the ones. And I should sort of, as we get into this, I think it's important to note that MCAS was designed at the 10th grade level to serve as part of our competency determination that we've determined at the Commonwealth that you have reached a level of mastery with the standards and you're eligible for a diploma. Prior to grade 10, okay, the MCAS information is really for educators to use to sort of gauge their ability to get kids to where they have to be on the framework. So there's no, I know that over time we have sort of lent a lot of meaning into those scores, and I think that it's fair, it is good representation. We're about to get into 80 pages actually of how well we performed on those assessments, but I think the key thing is that this is a new baseline year. And our educators are actually quite excited to get their hands on the new data so they can actually be reflective and figure out how they can improve their practice to help kids meet expectation and not any kind of a summative value or judgment about how kids are doing in school. I think most parents will get multiple measures of sort of student performance, and MCAS is just one piece of those, right? That's just one snapshot in time. It's not really reflective of their experience in the grade or their those 180 days that they spent engaged in school. This is really a snapshot in time. So again, I'm only going on what we've been informed by the state and sort of at the workshops that I've been at and looking at the data I've looked at. What they're suggesting is previously the tests were designed in a silo. So there was no connection to the third grade performance to fourth grade performance. And I think if we go back, what you'll note, and that's what this here is trying to illustrate, is that from year to year, we were up and we were down. And I think you noticed that from our performance, in historical performance. We generally did not do as well in 4th and 7th grade as we did in all other grades, right? And that was because those were the original place where MCAS first launched, and they were naturally designed differently. So as they built the new assessment, they reset sort of those expectations to build more coherence across grades. We don't actually have a predictor, but what we do know is that the performance on the next generation MCAS will be a good reflection and predictor of how well they will do the coming year.
Okay.
But there's no one-to-one correspondence, though. Does that
Yeah,
make
I
sense?
just wanted that to be made clear so that,
Sure.
you know, I mean, a kid who might have gotten advanced last year comes home with meeting expectations this year, and, you know,
Or who was
parents shouldn't run right out
proficient
the
and then
tutors.
are now
That's my point.
approaching expectations.
Yeah.
There is going to be a natural reset, and I think that's a good segue, because when we look at our performance, and I go when the tests were first released, the results were first went live. Sort of headlines across the state, right, is only 50% of the kids are now meeting expectations, and this sort of fervor emerged. That is not the pattern that we saw play out in Hingham. So I want to be really clear that our performance, given the new assessment, given the more rigorous design, our students performed quite well. And it's a good launching point to actually track and measure progress going forward. The old MCAS really did not allow us the ability to sort of set targeted goals, because there was really no way to gauge how well the next cohort would do, right, on that same assessment. Given the recalibration and the new establishment of coherence 3 to 8, we can set some real targeted improvement goals and sort of next year gauge to what extent do we actually meet those goals. So I generally am a half glass, half empty, half full kind of guy, right? So, although, you know, you'd think it was the other way. I generally am the glass is half full. So I look at it as a real, how often do we get to reset and sort of really track performance from here going forward? So it's a good opportunity for us. That's a good segue into what we actually administered last spring in Hingham. So again, the high school administered the legacy MCAS, and legacy is the old school MCAS. Hingham Middle School in grades 6, 7, and 8, English and math, administered the next generation assessment. While grade 8, science, technology, and engineering, administered the legacy MCAS. At the elementary level, grades 3, 4, and 5, ELA and math, administered next generation. When grade 5, science, technology, engineering, again, administered the legacy. This is a overall summary of the percentage of our students who were either meeting or exceeding expectations on the MCAS. And what you'll note is in the first column we have our performance, and in the right-hand column we have the state performance. So as you can see, across the board in every area and every subject across the grades, we outperform the state pretty consistently throughout. And in some instances, we actually outperform our benchmark communities, which we'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. So now my plan is to sort of run through with you briefly the various grades and do a summary of performance coming out of each of the grades. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time sort of with these bar charts. What I wanted to do, though, is give you some sense, again, because we no longer have the ability to do historical comparison. What I wanted to do was give you sort of a visual, though, of sort of with our benchmark communities, how did we sort of fare, right, on the new performance measure. And so what you'll note is throughout, everybody else is sort of a various gradient shade of red, where Hingham is vibrant red. So as we move through, you'll be able to see that bar sort of move up and down the scale comparatively against our benchmark communities. This is showing the percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding expectations in grade 3 reading, and this is for grade 3 mathematics. So really the focus here in grade 3 is 64% of the students are either met or exceeded expectations in reading, and we performed above the state on all 27 test items. We actually performed 9% higher than the state average in all content strands, language, reading, and writing. Relative to mathematics, 69% of our students earned a score of meeting or expectations or higher. We again performed above the state on all 40 test questions, and we evidenced 7 to 14 points above the state on all content strands, including geometry, measurement, and data, numbers and operations in base 10, numbers and operations fractions, and operations and algebraic thinking. This is our performance in grade 4 ELA and grade 4 mathematics. In grade 4 ELA, 74% of our students met or exceeded expectations and performed above the state average in all 27 test items. And as well, we performed 11% higher than the state average in all content strands, again, for language, writing, and reading. In mathematics, 79% of our students were either meeting or exceeding expectations. We performed above the state on all 40 test questions and performed between 11 to 19 points above the state on all content strands, including geometry, measurement and data, numbers and operations in base 10, numbers and operations, fractions, and operations and algebraic thinking. This is our performance in grade 5 English Language Arts, our performance in grade 5 mathematics, and our performance in grade 5 science, technology, and engineering. Again, you'll note that particularly in grade 5, we evidenced really strong performance against our benchmark communities. 81% of our fifth graders, current 6th grade, were 81% meeting or exceeding expectations. I almost said advanced or proficient there for a second. And we performed 12% higher in the state on all content strands. In mathematics, 82% of our students were either meeting or exceeding expectations, and again, above the state on 39 of the 40 test questions, and performed between 10 to 24 points above the state on all content strands. In science, 99% of our students earned a passing score, with 86% of our students being proficient or higher. Wow. We performed at or above the state on all 42 test questions, and 15 points above the state on all content strands: earth and space science, life science, physical science, technology, and engineering.
That's impressive.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't remember us being that high on science.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. We're now going to transition into the middle school level. So that was our elementary performance across all 4 of our schools. And now we're going to look into grade 6. So this shows our performance in grade 6 English Language Arts and our performance in grade 6 mathematics. In ELA, 78% of our 6th grade students either met or exceeded expectations of the new exam and performed above the state average in all 28 test questions. In mathematics, 72% earned a score either meeting or exceeding expectations and performed above the state on 39 of the 40 test questions. We were also above the state between 11 and 17 points, that is, on all content strands in mathematics. This is our performance in grade 7 English Language Arts and grade 7 mathematics. In ELA, 75% of the students met or exceeded expectations, and we performed above the state average in all 28 test items. In mathematics, 71% of our students earned a score of meeting expectations or higher, and are above or at the state average on 39 of the 40 test questions. We then look at our performance in grade 8 English Language Arts, grade 8 mathematics, and grade 8 science, technology, and engineering. In ELA, 70% of the Hingham 8th graders met or exceeded expectations and performed 8% higher than the state on all content strands. In mathematics, 62% of our students earned a passing score of meeting expectations or higher and performed at or above the state average on 32 of the 40 questions. And in science, 94% earned a passing score, with 61% of our students earning a score proficient or higher. We performed above the state on all 42 test questions and performed 10 points above the state average for all content strands. And so what I did there is sort of give you a sense of the next generation assessment, and I didn't necessarily dive as deep into grade 10 because, again, our performance was all very high, right, in grade 10. Yes, Cynthia?
Which grade 8 and 4 took the computer?
Yes.
Right.
Grade 8 and 4.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a summary, again, of our performance. In your report, you have detailed analysis by question item, and you actually see all 4 performance levels and the proportionate distribution of our students across all 4. Yes?
With Cynthia's question about the computerized, was that 8th and 4th for all communities that we're comparing ourselves to? Did they, all communities that we're comparing?
No, actually,
did those students also
many of
take
the
it
communities
online?
administered all of them online.
They all did, or they? It was
I'd have to go
mixed?
back and double check. The vast majority of them administered all grades 3 to 8 online. Yeah. There are a handful that administered like we did, but against those 21 communities, most of them had gone online 3 to 8. Yeah. Yes.
Many of the communities that had been park communities, because that was online, that's the commonality,
stuck
there's one
with the
commonality
online, yeah.
between the two. Many of those communities had been park communities, and they weren't as intimidated about the online piece. Everybody had to do 4 and 8, and we did that.
Do you know if they're doing any comparison with the PARC scores and the MCAS 2.0 scores? Since, I mean, did they use any of that data from PARC? Or is that they just wiped it clean
I don't
and,
know the answer to
because I know there were communities that did PARC. I'm just wondering
there
if
were.
they're using that in any way to compare with the new MCAS.
So no, I worked in a community that administered PARC for a number of years, and everyone is, and we even checked in at our superintendent's meeting, everyone is sort of starting fresh. There's no back comparisons. Even districts that administered PARC aren't comparing PARC performance to MCAS 2.0, because again, it's essentially a new baseline, right? And it resets the data for the whole state. Sorry, Liza, you had your hand up.
No, I was just looking at, the percentage that we met or exceeded compared to, like, if
For what?
8th grade was 70% on ELA, then what was the percentage for 7th grade? Looks like.
I'm sorry, so the question.
No, forget it. I can answer
Okay.
my own question.
So,
Sorry.
but also in the back of, in the appendix of the report, you have our comparison scores for all, actual numerical values for all of our benchmark communities. So if you're wondering, you can actually go right to the back charts, and it actually has us highlighted in yellow, and it has the actual numerical values. I thought the bar chart, just for the purposes of the public presentation, was easier to give it visual representation, but you do have the actual numbers both in the report as well as in the appendix.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it though, and it's, you get the middle, and the difference isn't that significant from
Fair,
community to
yeah.
community. I mean, we're further down on the scale, but
But again,
we're not that far
every
off
class
from
is
a lot
different,
of them.
you
Yeah.
know.
But
certainly know
we
that
are,
through
so
years.
we do sort of, I would argue for 3 to 8 for all students, we do remain competitive, right, against all of our 20 benchmark communities. What we'll note, though, as we get into the performance of some of our subgroups, is that performance does decline, right? So we have very strong performance for all of our students. When we look at some of our subgroups, we don't perform as strong as we do for all students. Carlos.
Question. In terms of the math, the students getting 62%, is there any way that you can go back and see where the students were weak and help them develop better on those areas that they felt that they didn't do well?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have all the test questions, but we have the strands, and we know the areas in which we didn't perform as well. And that's actually going to be in part 5, where we talk about next steps and the action planning the schools and the directors are having relative to the data, and working with our teachers to better understand the scores. Should I take an audience comment, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just have to ask them, that's all.
Yeah.
I guess my question is just, looking at this, I know you're saying that we compared well against the others, but I kind of I saw us kind of the middle the entire way through compared to our benchmark.
Except 4th and 5th grade, right? We were in the top quarter,
Right.
yeah.
And so I guess I'm wondering, is there any collaboration between our communities to find out what types of programming they're doing, especially the ones that are performing at the other end?
Mm-hmm.
What do their curriculums look like? Are they doing something that we're not doing? You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
just wondering if there's some sort of collaboration between these communities so that we can benefit from things that they seem to be benefiting from.
Sure. So that's a great point, and I think the answer is yes, right? So it's going to vary by district and department. So we have different relationships. If you look at those 21 towns, we have different relationships. Some of them are more local to us. We have better relations with them. Others are more sort of further away geographically. But as a part of our action planning, we are reaching out to some of those communities with higher levels of performance to find out sort of some information around instructional practices, curriculum materials, sort of pedagogical approaches, and what are they doing. Particularly, there's some that you'll see, particularly with some of our subgroups, which the difference is even more striking, that we're sort of saying, well, what's going on there? Like, how is it that level of performance is being realized in that community, and we're similarly situated, so what are they doing that's different? Yeah. And again, part 5 of the report will actually get into next steps more in depth and talk a little bit about the action planning that we're doing with the data. Any other questions?
So on
Yes.
that, the packet
that they have, is that what you're gonna be putting on the website?
Yes.
Okay.
And we did have a little bit of trouble. It's 90 plus pages. So we had a little bit of trouble scanning it as one document, but we did manage to get it together as one, and we'll post that up tomorrow, as well as my presentation slides. So you have both the formal report as well as the sort of the summary slides.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? No? Okay, so we're first going to work through our high need subgroup. So this is, what is the high need subgroup? The high need subgroup is an unduplicated count of all students in a school or a district belonging to at least one of the following individual subgroups. So that includes students with disabilities, students who are English language learners or second language learners, as well as students who are economically disadvantaged. So an unduplicated means if you are a student in one of the three categories, you only count once in the data, you don't count multiple times. So you could have a student who is a student with a disability who is an ELL and who also is economically disadvantaged. So their scores don't load 3 times into the analysis, right? It only loads once. And I want to be really clear that's what unduplicated means. Cynthia.
At what point does someone, is an ELL student always an ELL student?
No,
according
so
to
they
this?
could be, once they progress through the 6 sort of steps of proficiency in ELL, you can actually become what's referred to as a formally, is it still
Right, but
flat,
then those
formally
students-
English language proficient?
Those students are still included in this subgroup?
No, not once they exit from,
Okay.
and actually those students are additionally administered the access test, which is an assessment of proficiency, as well as MCAS. So we actually have 2 performance metrics for that population. We have the subgroups under 10, so we don't have ELL as a separate sort of subgroup because the population's too small. But as high needs, all 3 come together, and now we have enough to have a subgroup.
Okay.
Yeah. But on their own, we don't have like an ELL subgroup, if that makes sense. Any other? No? Okay. So if we just look at our high needs population, you'll note that the performance is either aligned with the state or below in some instances, or above. So there's no consistency here, whereas on the first, I guess it's just all 3 options, we're all over the map. Whereas the first one you saw is consistently outperform the state with high needs, where there's more of a mixed performance. And I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I'm still going to show you the benchmark comparisons, but I'm going to get into areas of strength and then areas for growth relative to how our students performed on these tests, rather than performance summary that we saw come out of the regular MCAS. So this is our performance on grade 3 reading and our performance on grade 3 mathematics. Now, in ELA, what we know is that we performed at or above the state on 22 out of 27 test items, and in mathematics, performed the state in 37 out of 40 test questions. What I'll note here is where we have areas of weakness is we notice they were, for ELA, in poetry, parts of speech, and identification of supporting evidence in text. And that's where, to the earlier question about do we know what those areas were, Carlos, right? And we do, actually, right? And so as we look at the performance of our high need subgroup, we note that those are the biggest area of challenge as we look at the data. In mathematics, the challenge areas included attributes of polygons, fractions on a number line, and fractions in a real-world context. So again, you'll notice later that we take these opportunities for growth and actually translate them into actionable action steps to improve student performance. This is our performance in grade 4 ELA for high needs and grade 4 mathematics for high needs. What we note here is that we perform above the state in ELA for all 27 test items. And in mathematics, we're above the state in 34 out of the 40 test items. We perform below the state for 6 out of the 40 test items. In ELA, our areas for growth included writing to compare or explain and writing in the narrative mode, or sort of writing a narrative. Under mathematics, our challenge areas included perpendicular lines, metric units, product of 2-digit numbers, and product of a whole number and a fraction. So again, we do have the information telling us sort of those areas in which our students are not performing as well as their peers. This is our performance in grade 5 ELA, our performance in grade 5 math, and our performance in grade 5 science, technology, and engineering. In ELA, we performed at or above the state for the high needs in 27 out of 28 test items. I'm pausing because that science is blank, and that shouldn't be blank, so I apologize for that. I will scramble through my notes and find that line. 87 slides later, and that had to be at least one error, right? I mean, so, okay.
We did really well on that. Yeah, Jamie, we did really well on that test, so
Well, there you go, right? Fair
not
enough.
too much to put in there.
It wasn't intentional, and it very well just could have been an oversight. It was an oversight, actually. Our opportunities for growth in ELA include vocabulary and context, speaker's tone, and point of view in poetry, right? What areas of weakness. In mathematics, our challenges included order of operations with grouping symbols, comparing mixed numbers and decimals, and subtraction of decimals with unlike denominators. And I am now frantically scrambling through my report to find grade 5. Bear with me. I'm going to circle back just so I don't keep up too much time. I apologize. Katie, if you find it, did you find it?
I did not, but it's very similar to students with disabilities.
They mirror. That's right. Yeah. I will circle back.
I think
Apologies.
it's, well, you don't have page numbers. I found it, but this doesn't have page numbers.
Okay.
It says open response questions remains an area for continued focus for all students.
That's right. I should remember that. Open response. Thank you. Please. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, no, actually, it's
No,
blank in
it's-
here.
it's-
It's blank in
it's
here,
blank in
sorry.
the book, too.
Oh, it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was
Apologies.
reading the next page. Yeah, no, it's blank in here, too.
Gotcha. You're in students with disabilities.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is high needs. But they are, they're similar performance, and you'll note that those two groups actually will have similar areas of performance. Okay, so that was grade 5. This is our performance in grade 6 ELA, in grade 6 mathematics. Our summary performance here in ELA, again, above or at the state average in 24 to 28 items. The areas of challenge, however, included identifying author's purpose, analyzing word choice, and evaluating supporting evidence. In mathematics, we were at or above the state in 33 out of 40 test questions, and below the state average for 7 out of 40 test questions. The challenge areas in mathematics included areas of a circle, volume of a prism, and equations in a real-world context. Those are our 3 areas of weakness for mathematics. This is our performance in grade 7 ELA, our performance in grade 7 mathematics. In grade 7 ELA, at or above the state average for high needs students in 24 out of 28 test items. And the areas of challenge here included drawing inferences, determining theme, and identifying the purpose of a poetic form. In mathematics, we see we were at or above the state in 34 out of 40 of the test questions, and below the state average in 6 out of the 40 test items. The areas of challenge here were multi-step real-world problems involving ratios, real-world problems involving angle properties, and equivalent expressions were our areas of weakness in grade 7 mathematics. This is our performance in grade 8 ELA, our performance in grade 8 mathematics, and our performance in grade 8 science, technology, and engineering. Relative to our areas of performance, in ELA, we performed at or above the state average for high need students in 22 out of 28 items. The areas of challenge here included identifying supporting evidence, determining point of view, analyzing word choice, and the development of a central idea. You know why there's no science? I'm sorry, because later in the presentation, you have your own slide for science, where we talk about areas of weakness. Sorry. So there is a reason. It just came to me. Why they're not in the grid is because later they actually have their own slide, which we'll get to. I knew I wasn't going crazy. Hours. This is take out. Okay. Apologies there. In mathematics, we performed at or above the state on 13 out of 40 test questions. And our areas of challenge here in mathematics included determining functions from tables and ordered pairs, angle rotations, and using tables to solve problems, and we'll get more in depth with science in just a couple minutes. So now we're going to look at our performance of our students with disabilities subgroup. So again,
Jamie, just back, sorry.
yeah.
So on all those high needs, so each grade, even in Hingham, has a different composition of mix of students and numbers of students in those categories, correct?
Yes, correct.
And we have no idea of the benchmark communities, how many students or of what their needs are in all of their.
So we don't know what
components.
their needs are, but we know the total N. So if we go to the tables where all the data is, it actually show us the total N that was included in the analysis. But we'd have to go to all of those communities' grids to figure out their Ns. Does that answer your question? So we don't know what their needs are, but we know the total number of students included in that subgroup for that grade.
Yeah.
And we don't know how many
We don't know the
children
makeup
took the
of,
alternate test as well.
yeah.
That's something
Yeah,
that we
so
can look at.
I guess for me now, hearing this, it's a little hard to compare to others because we don't know what we're comparing
Oh, sure.
to.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely want to watch, this is our baseline,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to address the needs.
correct.
But it's also grade to grade, there are different needs that are addressed grade to grade.
Correct. And the needs of the students in those subgroups will vary according to level and grade, in school even, yeah. There's going to be variation.
That information is available. I mean,
Yeah.
that breakdown is available on the DESC website.
No, I said that. I said.
I didn't sound like Liza got that. Did you hear that?
No, I understand that the data is available, but
It's very comparable. I don't know, I'm confused.
well, if you have in one town that your high needs is made up of a higher percentage of low-income students to English language learners.
Oh, so we don't know that. We just know the total number,
Right.
the total N in the subgroup.
Right, right.
Yeah. Sorry, we don't know, but that's fair. I misunderstood. We don't know the distribution of that N into the multiple groups. Because if you had a subgroup, I mean, I guess you could figure out with math, I guess. You could, get a calculator and subtract out kids with disabilities, subtract out economic. But if those other two groups were under 10, we wouldn't know we wouldn't know how many economically disadvantaged or ELLs. We would just, we just know the total N. Now I'm thinking it through. We wouldn't know unless we subtract it out. Correct. But I'm saying, like if I went to, ours, for example, it might say our total grade 8 high needs subgroup, the total N was 28. Just bear with me. And if I went to students with disabilities, it might be 21. So I know that 9 other students are left over. I don't know whether they were EL or economic disadvantage because those as individual subgroups are suppressed because they're under 10. Does that make sense?
But you can pull out learning disability, you can pull out special education.
Right. Well, they're their own subgroup,
Right,
right? So
they're their own
that's the
right.
next group.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the performance of our students with disabilities. And the students with disability subgroup is a count of all students in a district or a school with a disability as defined in NDA who has a current IEP. That's how we determine who goes into this subgroup. What you'll note here is pretty consistently through the elementary level, we are outperforming the state relative to our students, the performance of our students with disabilities. And that holds true through grade 6. Grade 7 and grade 8 we begin to sort of approach and have commensurate performance with the state. And again, we'll do a similar pattern where we will break down show you the performance of those subgroups against our peer groups, and then identify the areas of strength and opportunity across those grades rather. So this is the performance of our students with disabilities in grade 3 reading compared to our benchmark communities in grade 3 mathematics. Here, our opportunities for growth include poetry, determining parts of speech and identifying supporting evidence. Again, you'll note very similar areas of challenge to our high need subgroup, right? So both of those populations are presenting with similar challenges. We do have 22 performing at or above the state in 22 out of 27 test items. In mathematics, our grade 3 students performed above the state average on 39 out of 40 test questions. However, our areas of challenge included attributes of polygons, fractions on a number line, and determining mass using a subtraction equation. So again, similar performance patterns. This is our performance of our grade 4 students in English Language Arts and our grade 4 students in mathematics. In grade 4, our kids with disabilities performed above the state average on all 27 test items. But our areas for our opportunities for growth rather include writing to compare or explain and identifying supporting evidence with the areas of weakness. In mathematics, our grade 4 students performed at or above the state average on 38 out of 40 of the test items, while we performed either at or below the state average in 2 out of the 40 test items. Our challenges here included perpendicular lines, metric units, product of 2-digit numbers, the product of a whole number and a fraction, and interpreting a remainder for the areas of weakness. This is our performance in grade 5 ELA, our performance in grade 5 mathematics, and our performance in grade 5 science, technology, and engineering. In grade 5 ELA, we have performed at or above the state average on 27 out of 28 items, with the areas of weakness focusing in on vocabulary and context, and a speaker's tone and the point of view in poetry for areas of weakness for our students. In mathematics, we performed at or above the state average on 38 out of 40 test items, with our challenge areas including orders of operations with grouping symbols, comparing mixed numbers and decimals, and expressions and their written equivalents for areas of weakness. In science, we performed at or above the state average in 41 out of 42 test items, with open response questions remaining an area of continued focus for all of our students. And again, that was consistent across all of our groups, really, was the open responses. In grade 6, this is our performance with English Language Arts, our performance in grade 6 mathematics. And here, in ELA, our areas of challenge include identifying author's purpose, connecting story elements to theme, and finding supporting evidence. But we did perform at or above the state average in 24 out of 28 test items. In mathematics, our areas of challenge included measurements of circles, distributive property, and equations in a real-world context. But we did perform at or above the state average in 37 out of 40 test items. This is a picture of our performance in grade 7 ELA and grade 7 mathematics. In terms of English Language Arts, our areas of challenge included drawing inferences, determining theme, and identifying punctuation function. And in mathematics, our challenge areas included multi-step real-world problems involving ratios, real-world problems involving angles, and equivalent expressions. You probably hear the phrase real-world application a lot, and that's where, for the most part, we're having a breakdown. We can sort of do it in isolation at a equation level, but when you actually go to apply, that's where we're sort of seeing our performance breakdown. Explaining and articulating where you got your answer from. Right. This is a picture of grade 8 English Language Arts, a picture of grade 8 mathematics, and grade 8 science, technology, and engineering. Again, in English Language Arts, our areas of challenge include identifying supporting evidence and determining points of view, as well as analyzing the development of a central idea. In mathematics, our areas of weakness included determining functions from a table in ordered pairs, angle rotations, and using tables to solve problems. And in science, open response questions and multiple choice questions were an area of focus in science. There were historical questions about sort of the number of students who are taking MCAS Alt or took MCAS Alt last spring, and that number is 16. We had 2 at East School, 2 at Foster School, 1 at Plymouth River, 4 at South Elementary, 5 at Hingham Middle, and then 2 at Hingham High School. And the decision making relative to who actually takes MCAS Alt has not changed, and this is decision making tree that the teams will work through to determine whether or not an alternative assessment makes sense for that particular student. Now let's talk about next steps. So that's just the data, and now I want to talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do with that. The first thing is district-based action planning. So we will have a district analysis of both the district, school, and student results going down into item analysis, as well as disaggregated results with our teaching staff. So again, it's important for our educators to actually see this data, look at student performance, but not only look at how well their students did last year, but also be thoughtful about the current students in front of them and how their performance might have been the previous year. We continue to use MCAS scores to look at individual students and cohort results. And this is going to be even important going forward as we begin to sort of set new goals and benchmarks and sort of track performance from here going forward, right? We want continued opportunities for students to practice answering variety types of questions and assessment measures and to practice test-taking strategies. Continued emphasis on the use of instructional strategies which promote critical thinking, extended problem solving, and writing for a variety of purposes. We're going to use the supervision and evaluation process to ensure consistent implementation of curriculum standards across buildings and across grades. We are redirecting Title I funds to Hingham Middle School. We will be continuing our foster program in our East program this year, but going into next year, we're going to be redirecting most of the funds to, not most, but foster will still run a program, but the rest of the funds will be redirected to a new Hingham Middle School program to target, actually our middle school Title I coordinator is here, Melissa, who's this year overseeing the first year rollout of a new middle school Title I program in mathematics, targeting our performance in that area. We're also, in the winter, going to be forming a task force to examine our K-8, actually examine our current K-5 intervention program and then work to roll out and implement a 6-8 intervention program. So right now, RTI, or sort of academic support, is alive and well in grades K-5, but not necessarily as structured in grades 6 to 8. So the HTSS, as you know, the Hingham Tier System of Support, we're currently building the social-emotional multi-tiered intervention model. But the goal is this spring to bring together educators to actually build and roll out a K-8 academic intervention model to ensure that we're providing responsive, timely instruction in the areas that kids need it. When we look at elementary English language arts, we know that writing, so idea development and conventions were areas for improvement and for all of our students. Language, vocabulary and context and parts of speech were both areas of weakness, as well as in terms of reading, areas for improvement include point of view, main idea, inference, character development, supporting evidence, vocabulary and context, and paired passages across genres were areas that for improvement. So what are we going to do about that? We're targeting implementation of the journeys, and we're actually looking specifically at the parts of speech lessons. That was an area of weakness pretty consistently. So Mary Andrews, our English director who is here, is working on a targeted implementation of those parts of speech lessons in our English language arts program to ensure that being implemented with fidelity and consistency across the elementary program. We also are running Empowering Writers Professional Development, and this is really looking at expository responses to text and incorporation of writing strategies across all content areas, which will also help address the open response issue that we're seeing in science relative to written output. Regular implementation of standards-based reading assessments. We can actually have some real-time data that track and monitor student progress across the course of the school year, and direct instruction in responding to questions that compare multiple texts. So that was another area of weakness. So look at this piece of writing, this piece of writing, what are we seeing that's consistent, and sort of what are we seeing that's not, and sort of how do we then sort of generate a synthesis of ideas to produce a new piece of writing or a new idea out of those multiple texts. We're also looking at online test practice to ensure familiarity with the format. So one of the things that we noticed, so Mary and I attended a real page turner of a presentation relative to unpacking our essay results and looking. One of the things that we sort of looked at when we looked at some scatter plot analysis was the more you wrote, the higher the score. And one of the things that we also noted was when the kids took the test online, they saw a text box, right? And so most of our kids would fill up the text box, but didn't necessarily keep on typing. And in fact, the text box continued to scroll down further and further and further until you reach the total sort of word count maximum. So things like that, like actually working with our kids so they know you can keep writing. It's okay. It just keeps going, right? They filled up the box, but didn't necessarily go beyond the box. And so there's things like that we now know, so that going forward, we can better prepare our students with the test-taking format so they can understand better how to actually perform. We also are going to be making a concerted effort to include our special education teachers in all department meetings and ongoing discussions regarding MCAS. And that's really so we can establish some collective strategies for improvement, right, across, they're not our kids or your kids or kids with disabilities or regular ed kids, it's all of our kids, right? We want to make sure that all of our kids are finding success in our program. When we look at elementary mathematics, we had those areas that were less successful, including geometry and measurement in grade 3 with area and perimeter. Grade 4, it was solving multi-step problems with all operations, and in grade 5, it was increasing rigor of order of operation problems. We also saw new question types, so selected response questions and constructed responses, and over half of our relative areas of weakness had to do with applying math to real-world problems. It wasn't a knowledge of the algorithm, it was a knowledge of application, and that was our biggest area of weakness in elementary mathematics. So when we look at how to improve, right, in that area, looking at district-wide Tier 1 instructional coaching for all classroom teachers with a particular focus on differentiated instruction using the math workshop model. You heard Melissa talk about that a little bit earlier. That's something she's really spearheading over at Plymouth River, but that initiative is taking hold across the district. We're really looking at the math workshop model as being our sort of avenue, right, our ability to hit all students using differentiated instruction using that framework. We also have a district-wide instructional coaching on number talks to actually help our classroom teachers promote flexible thinking with in base 10 arithmetic.
What does that mean?
Which part? Number talks?
Yeah.
So number talks is where the teacher might put up a problem on the flip chart or the flip chart board, and then they have actual discussion about multiple ways to solve the same problem. Okay. How would you approach the task? Now, what is this student doing that's unique and different, and how can we all learn that kind of a strategy? It's to increase the occurrence of discussion of mathematics beyond just math block. Does that make sense? We want to actually encourage our discussions and talking about math more than just that 40-minute window where we actually do direct instruction in math. So what all of our elementary teachers, for example, have morning meeting. So it would not be uncommon to see a math number talk happening during morning meeting. Like we're still building relationships in the classroom, but the conversation is about math as opposed to what are you doing for the weekend? Or what did you do last night, right? We're so literacy focused that this is an active shift to make us more mathematically focused in our conversations and classroom discussions.
And going back to that whole thing of being able to explain how you got to a
and that's why we use the number talks, is that we actually model and they'll hear other kids talk through, well, what was your thinking and how you approached that problem or how you got to that answer. We also want to increase practice on the new question types, more coordination between math and special education to discuss areas for improvement. Development of power standards and elementary progression of standards through multiple grades is going to be a new piece of work for us, and reviewing the depth and rigor of everyday math for units of study and adding supplemental materials as needed. For example, in grade 3, we're adding materials relative to geometry and measurement with area and perimeter. In grade 4, we're adding materials relative to solving multi-step problems with operations. And in grade 5, increase rigor of the order of operation problems. And again, to maintain a focus on everyday math, 1 and 2-day open response units. Yes?
What are power standards?
So power standards are a organizational strategy to help determine core areas of focus for the math, for actually in any content area. So it actually may be worth at some point coming back and talking to you a little bit about our curriculum work, because it goes back to our building of K-12 curriculum apps. And so you build the map by first unpacking the standards and identifying those areas. There's 3 criteria that make something a power standard. It has to give you endurance. It has to give you, so that means endurance sort of across multiple years. You're going to use that same skill, that same strategy. It has to give you leverage across multiple subject areas. And it has to give you readiness for the next grade level. And if a standard meets those 3 criteria, it becomes a power standard, which then become the sort of the big areas of focus in our curriculum, in our unit development. So those then form the basis of our units of study, and those then form sort of the way that we track and sort of monitor student progress over time. It's a curriculum organizational technique. It came out of the work of Larry Ainsworth in building rigorous curriculum design. So we're using that model to build our curriculum. You're welcome. So that's elementary ELA and mathematics. And then this is grade 5 science, which is why they weren't in the little grid, because Katie has her own slide. So when it comes to science, strategies for improvement on open response questions, including reading comprehension strategies, highlighting relevant content, circle action words, and addressing each part of a multi-step question, as well as further integration of engineering is needed across the grades. And that's a sample open response questions, just so you can kind of get a sense of what the students were being asked to do in grade 5.
So when they're doing this on a computer.
They're not yet in science.
Not in science.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But they will be, this year we're starting to move towards.
Pilot,
that.
yeah.
So we have a hybrid year this year. Because both the 5th grade and the 8th grade are assessing 3 grade levels. So it's assessing 3 years worth of content. They're phasing it in over time. And so this year will be assessed on a hybrid set of standards from the old and new standard stuff.
But
And that's a great
So,
that's a great note about the science, is that they're cumulative. So in grade 5, they're assessing standards from grades 3, 4, and 5, and in grade 8, they're assessing standards from 6, 7, and 8. Whereas all the other assessments are based in a year. So the grade 4 ELA is based on what you learned in grade 4. Whereas the science in grade 5, it's being assessed on what you learned in grades 3, 4, and 5. Sorry.
So then I guess my question is, this highlighting and circling, when they're taking the math of the ELA on a computer, is there a way of using
Highlighting?
it,
Yeah.
highlighting and a pen, like a stylus, to circle what you're doing?
There are, yeah. There's a highlight function, yeah, same way. So that's grade 5, science. When we look at middle school, areas for improvement relative to middle school English, again, writing, idea development, and conventions were areas of weakness in terms of language, word choice and punctuation, function, mechanics, and vocabulary and context were areas of weakness. And reading skill, point of view, development of central idea, inferencing, determining theme, supporting evidence, author's purpose, and poetic form were the areas for improvement. When we look at our action plan going into, or strategies for improvement, is they've adopted a district-wide, a department-wide goal to implement strategies from notice and note in an effort to promote improved reading comprehension in the classroom. We're looking at small group instruction and reading labs for students who are demonstrating need for additional reading support, incorporation of current events, articles for expository nonfiction practice, targeted grammar instruction through the language network and other resources, direct vocabulary instruction using classical roots programming, the classical roots program, direct instruction on responding to questions that compare multiple texts, multiple and ample opportunities for online test taking and test taking practice to ensure familiarity with the format, especially with regards to essay writing and required text boxes like we talked about with our 4th graders. And again, the inclusion of our special educators in the department meetings and to ensure ongoing discussions and regarding MCAS finding and strategies for improvement is going to be critical. In terms of mathematics, the curriculum areas that we needed for the biggest area of improvement were in grade 6, algebraic expressions and geometry, grade 7, using operations to develop equivalent expressions, and in grade 8, geometry, systems of equations, comparing functions, and the Pythagorean theorem. Question types, again, were constructed response and selected response, and our grade 8 high needs student performance is an area of focus for us. In terms of middle strategies for improvement, we have a new Title I program in grade 6 and a new grade 6 math class, one section that's running at a slightly slower pace to ensure kids are able to sort of absorb the content. IXL adaptive software is being used in grades 7 and 8 in small group in small group instruction course. Math Plus instruction will provide focus on practicing new question types. Practice modules on new tests types embedded into assessments in the regular curriculum. New after-school MCAS prep for all 3 grades are being added this spring, and more coordination between the math department and special ed department. They'll also be reviewing the HMS calculator use and reinforcement of fact fluency. we're looking at a greater coordination between grades 5 and 6. So we want to make sure we get our teachers together to be talking about that transition to ensure we have sort of continuity of programming from 5 to 6. We're evaluating evaluation of Math 8 curriculum decisions, MCAS versus progress toward Algebra 1 proficiency. And the development of geometry progression through the middle school grades. Geometry was an area of weakness sort of throughout the middle school program. Yes?
The after-school MCAS prep, is that voluntary? I mean, how do you?
I believe it is. It's by invitation. So we looked at areas.
It's not done required, it's invitation. Is it based on past performance kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that. Invitation only.
Yeah.
So that's middle school mathematics. In middle school science, again, strategies for improvement on multiple choice included incorporating additional data-rich case studies and practice interpreting graphs and diagrams. Strategies for improvement on open response include reading comprehension strategies and addressing each part of a multi-step question. And further integration of engineering is needed throughout grade 6 to 8 science content. And again, Katie's given us some sample multiple choice questions so you can sort of get a sense of the application needed, right, to actually solve the problems.
Too, is that the diagrams, if they're not the exact same diagram they've seen before, that's another thing we need to work on, is kind of the flexibility of thinking, because one cell diagram might look very different in one artist's representation to another. So I think we'll need to try to introduce, instead of using one model, we'll have to introduce
multiple models. Yeah.
Models, yeah.
It's a fair point. Okay. When we talk about kids with disabilities, the Office of Student Services is launching a specific improvement plan relative to the performance of that population of kids. Again, focus on measurable goal writing and associated data collection to track and monitor student performance and ensure that IEP goals are aligned with grade level learning expectation and content. We need to make sure that our special educators have a strong understanding of grade level performance in regular ed so that they can make sure that they're tailoring the specialized instruction to ensure access to the grade level content. We also want to make sure that the content, that our special educators receive content directed PD in ELA, mathematics, and in science, and that they engage in that same teacher-level data analysis of student responses that our regular education teachers do. We're also looking at increased tiered support instruction at the elementary level, and that is mostly happening through mathematics. Right now through Easton Foster, through our Title I program, but we are exploring again, a K-5 universal model across all 4 schools going into next school year, and that work will begin through our task force. To continue on with the improvement plan here, targeted professional development in the following areas. There was a 3-day district course running through our professional development program on strengthening IEP goals and IEP development. Differentiated instruction for our general education teachers, and actually sort of an overview course on communication disorders and their impact and sort of strategies for working with this population of kids in school, as well as a comprehensive course on Section 504 procedures and rights and responsibilities that I am teaching, and it's riveting, right? We have a number of people in the class here. That's right. They can't wait till January. We also have a 3-day course coming up on Project Read Written Expression and Framing Your Thoughts for all of our special education staff in grades K to 8, which is a specialized systematic rules-based approach to teaching writing that we hope will also address our weaknesses in open responses as well as in writing. Executive functioning PD, smart but scattered. We've had Sarah Ward, thinking in an organized way, planning ahead and managing materials in the home and the school. We're also looking at student support activities, including a Hingham High School after-school targeted math instruction group, Hingham Middle School after-school targeted math instructions groups, Hingham High School and Hingham Middle School executive functioning pilot programs, as well as administrative support, professional training on the Special Education Procedures Manual and its implementation across the district. And I believe that's an overview of the action planning. Are there any questions?
Ginny, is Sarah Ward coming and working with the teachers, or are you just adopting her program?
No, it's a professional development session that she's hosting.
So she's.
So yes, she is.
No,
Oh.
you're going to
see her at a different.
But it's going to be
site.
Sarah Ward. I
Yeah.
guess, yes, it'll be Sarah Ward, yeah.
And all teachers are doing that?
No, that's going to be targeted teachers for the executive
From
function.
Hingham, from the middle and high school level,
Yeah,
right.
or and elementary,
Okay.
primarily secondary, yes.
So it's not going to be all teachers, it'll be special educators primarily focused in middle and high school to align with the executive functioning groups they're running after school.
So if it's just the special educators, what about kids that are on 504s? Like,
So we're not excluding anybody. This is year one of, and they're sending their special ed teachers to sort of see if it makes sense. We have we know Sarah Ward, so if it's something that we think makes sense, we could bring her on site. But again, this is we're not. I want to be really clear. We're not doing anything to exclude anybody. This is where we're starting, right? So they're starting by really targeting the special educators to actually learn and build their skills relative to executive functioning to work with our kids who have disabilities, whose disability then impacts that area of performance. And any takeaways, we'll sort of learn from them, and if needed, we'll continue that work with all of our educators.
And it's good follow-up, because we've had her before.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have questions at this point? Doctor, do you have something?
Well, I'd just like to make a comment that one of the things we are promised about moving to online testing was a speedier turnaround of information, because here we are in November, and certainly we started a lot of these things because we had preliminary results back in September. So certainly professional development, those kinds of plans we were able to make. But when you think about it, we're here in November, and we're going to be in April and May for most grades testing again. So that's not a lot of time to do training, to get it into the classroom and that kind of thing. So we certainly are looking forward to sooner knowing what the results are, and therefore having more time to actually do the action steps that are included here.
Okay, yeah.
Are you doing anything, I guess you could probably call it extra for the 8th grade class, just because just looking at their performance, and then they're going to have basically a break, and then they're going to be the first ones taking MCAS 2.0 as 10th graders. So,
yeah.
Well, they'll still take the legacy, won't they? I think
no.
The current.
9th graders.
Last year's 8th grade will take.
So my son's in 9th grade.
Yeah,
He's going to actually be the
years.
first one taking the new MCAS 2.0 as a 10th grader.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, looking at the 8th grade performance, in some ways it's a little, I'm just wondering if you're going to be doing anything, because they're going to have a year break, and then they're going to have they're not going to be like the other kids having trials and tribulations for a couple of years before they actually have to take the 10th grade test. So I was just curious if there were some thoughts behind that.
Mary.
So that is true. We have our last year of legacy this spring. What they've already said in anticipation of having to tweak the exam at the 10th grade level is that for the first 2 years that they give it, it will be sort of like a modified amalgam of results that they'll use to count for the graduation required. It won't be the cutoff that they'll use 3 years from now. So it's sort of giving themselves some time exactly to modify requirements.
Okay.
So it seems as if they do anticipate that there'll be some adjustments that are necessary.
Yeah, I would think
So to directly answer your question, at this stage we had not planned anything for the current 9th grade, but I can certainly talk to Mary and to Dave, the English and math directors, about sort of potential. I know we're running high school after school mathematics groups, and that could be,
Yes. For targeted students.
Correct. So those by invitation only. So, but in terms of the whole group, that has not been a part of our plan.
Well, especially the 9th graders who kind of get a free year, but they almost.
Well, they're in school, right? I mean, they're being assessed every day by the teachers, and I mean, I hear your point though. They're not taking a statewide assessment, although they're taking science, aren't they?
Right, and also for ELA students that have been sort of scanned as needing reading improvement. If there's a 9th grade and 10th grade reading lab that they're selected to take part in, so that there's not sort of that gap time for those students that have skipped history.
Because it's so new.
But those are all for targeted groups. We don't have anything for the whole grade,
Right.
right?
For the whole group.
Are you referring to some of the actual physical test-taking skills, such as that text box, that type
Yeah.
of thing of, you know, you need to know how to take the test.
It's a new test, and they
Yeah.
had one
And
basically try
they had
at it,
one, they have a
and
year off, and
now-
then they do it again.
And then
so,
10th grade
yeah.
is more important than, let's say, some of the other grades. So I'm just wondering, they're not going to have that experience, and probably will have forgotten a lot from 8th grade.
And not
so.
that we want to train them to spend time taking a test, but
It is
we don't want
new.
to lose out their opportunity of something either, so, unfortunately. But they do have to pass it.
And
correct.
because it seemed like that grade was, their performance was a lot lower than the other grades, so they are, it is a sensitive group, let's put it that way, so. That's the reason for my question.
And their skills that they need, we're not talking about test-taking skills, open response questions. I mean, these are skills they're learning in school right now. So, I mean, there's reason to support that for every student. Those are very real-life issues that we're trying
Right.
to close the gap on,
Yeah.
not test-taking issues. I think that was my big takeaway from that a lot of the terms that you use, Jamie, and you're familiar with these, are terms that you're going to hear on a typical IEP. So there's a lot of cross between some of the issues that everybody would benefit from. So.
And I wasn't sort of being fresh or facetious earlier. I'm being real that our educators are doing sort of in-depth data analysis so that adjusting practice, that's one of the standards against which they're evaluated, is their adjustment to practice, making sure that they're looking at data to inform their instruction so that it doesn't happen in isolation. Again, I know we have room for improvement, but I think on the whole, our performance is strong comparative to our benchmark community in the total aggregate. We have an achievement gap with our kids with disabilities and our kids who are in the high need subgroup, but again, I think the takeaway I'd like you to walk away from is we had strong performance. We are competitive with our benchmark communities, and we did not see those headlines of, half the kids are no longer proficient. That just did not play itself out. So I appreciate sort of the anxiety relative to what's going to happen. I don't have all those answers. What I can tell you is we have a talented faculty who are dedicated to our student achievement and student performance, and your children are in excellent hands. So I just want to sort of leave it there. Cynthia.
Last question, sorry. As far as science in high school, so biology, 9th grade, this year and next year, what tests are they taking?
So the biology will continue to be the legacy
Both years.
design test.
Okay.
The state still has not made a firm commitment as to when they will be transitioning the science, but our current 8th graders will be getting experience in that online platform. And so, again, the state has not made a firm decision on when the 10th grade test will change. And it will be biology only. There used to be a chemistry test that a few of our students would take if they were transferring in from another district, say as a junior. That will no longer be an option. And so biology will be the focus.
Okay, thanks.
I want to thank Jamie, everyone, all the department heads for doing this deep dive. We've never had this deep a level of report on the MCAS data. So all of you, all the staff, I know you spent a lot of time on this, and it was a quick turnaround.
It's a good team.
And to have a launching pad of where we're going and knowing a lot more than we ever have is going to help everyone. And so we really appreciate all the work that went into it and you sharing it in such detail as well and making it available to parents that have a passion for looking at it, and for all of us. And I will reach out to some of our benchmark towns and even talk to school committee members of what can they tell us that they do and where do they invest their money. Because I know that also for us having, as we talk about, our low per pupil costs, we do okay, so we need to see where people are getting more money from and how they're investing it and if that's playing out and how we can learn from that.
And I bet we'll get
too.
some calls about grade 5. Right. So I mean, the thing to keep in mind, right, is that if you sort of go through those bar charts, it's not like there's the one community at the top the whole way through. They really do vary by grade and by subject. I think that variation is amongst sort of all of those communities. So it's not like we can call like in Lexington. What are you doing in Lexington? Because that might work in grade 3 English, but it's not, or reading, right? But it's not necessarily a consistent pattern.
Yeah.
But that's a fair point, particularly with our kids with disabilities. We see some communities that are consistently a little bit higher that will sort of explore a little bit more deeper what's going on there.
Great.
But thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Nice job.
Okay, 6.4. As we talk about moving forward, to receive a draft of proposed superintendent goals for November 17 through October 2018. And we are just hearing these proposed goals, and I believe the next, Dr. Gall, the next meeting, we vote on them.
You have the goals
Right.
with the action steps. Because the print is small, I made a slide with simply the goals on it.
Okay.
And I'll show those, and we can talk about the action steps, because you all have the complete report. So, let me just do the... Oh.
Sorry, I shouldn't have turned it off.
Guys, show
I'm right back.
thing. That's any better or not, but in any event, so there are 5 goals, 1 student performance goal, and 4 that are either district performance or personal growth goals. So 5 in all. So as I mentioned a minute ago, what you have here is simply the goal, and the school committee also has the many action steps that are beneath each of those goals. So the student performance goal is to work with Liz and Jamie and the special ed subcommittee to support the special education improvement work and goals. We can go back to that one if you want to talk more about action steps. Second goal, which is school improvement, because it is a specific school here, to work with John Ferris and the Long Range Planning Committee to support and facilitate the work of the 2017 School Building Committee. They are an independent committee appointed by moderator, Board of Selectmen, and school committee, so they don't exist as a subcommittee under the school committee direction, but they meet here. We are their administrative support, for example, and we're the ones that have to chase around and get the signatures and process all of the purchase orders and those kinds of things. So they do need a level of support from us because they're independent and not part of any other department. And there's a great deal of collaboration with the MSBA, and I'm assuming here that we're going to hear some good news, hopefully within the next couple of weeks actually, and that we actually will be working with them with the MSBA moving forward and not just working with them as we have been since they've been appointed. And they've been working mainly in the area of looking at the site, having borings done and so on. And again, within a couple of weeks, we hope to have that information as well. Personal growth goal, working with members of the leadership team. The leadership team in Hingham is all of the principals, all of central office, all of the assistant principals at all levels, and resource teachers, and directors, and so group of, I think, 37, 38 people at this point, but to work with that group to form a work group or task force of volunteers to explore options for improving parent access to expectations for student work and for student assignments and projects. And this has been something that we've heard over and over again that while we have a lot of information on our website, and while many of our teachers have their own web pages where parents can get information, parents are looking for a more convenient way to, with fewer voyages out into the website, to get information about, particularly in the case where there are multiple children, or as kids get into middle school and high school where there are multiple teachers. So we've given some thought to some ways that we can do that, we can then ask teachers to give us some input about, and to sort of build a process up that we hope will be information that teachers can, number one, contribute to our thoughts about how to do this. And we know some things from some other communities, so we've done some initial exploration here, and something that teachers then can buy into, as opposed to something that we would simply mandate for people to use without having any sort of input. District improvement goal number 4, to work with Jamie and the building principals to facilitate the self-study process for the anticipated 2018-19 coordinated review. And you have to know that when we do a coordinated review, we hear a lot about that in conjunction with special education. But each time we have to do a coordinated program review, they also assess other things. For example, civil rights standards or criterion, or it may be Title I standards or criterion. So when we finally find out from DESE, hopefully soon, we're waiting to find out how comprehensive our coordinated program will be for next year, because we have to do the self-study for it this year. So once we find those, obviously the special ed criterion will be reviewed and the self-study work will be done by the special education department. But for those other departments, typically it is at the superintendent, assistant superintendent level, where we'll find out what criterion in those other categories, and then have to provide the self-study templates. Everything is done online these days, and get all of that information in, and that will then be forwarded on to the people who will actually come here in the next school year, 18-19, to do the report. And then the last one, work with the administrative intern and in coordination with members of long-range planning, again, to manage and facilitate an external enrollment projection. We were going to do this last year when we entered into the SOI with MSBA. We spoke with them and they said hold off on that, and so now we are planning to do that this year, and it can be funded this year because of the amount of money that was in capital for this year for the master plan work, and the same pool of money from which we've paid for the engineering work that has been done at Foster. So it's reasonable to do. I've already collected some information about firms that do this. We would go out and get quotes, hire a firm, and then work with them. Because when we have people to come in, work with us, whether it's someone doing an evaluation or someone doing another service for us, is an enormous amount of work that we have to do to support that group's efforts. We have to provide the data, we have to set up the schedules, we have to facilitate their exploration, and so on. So that is going to be happening later this spring. So that's it for the actual goals. Each one has 5, 7 different numbers of action steps under them, and those will be available. This is a draft document because the school committee needs to vote a consensus on these goals, and when that happens, if it's done tonight, fine. If not, whenever that's available, I will put that on the website.
Does anybody have questions or comments? Yeah, okay.
With goal number 3, can you give me just a little bit of information about how you came about choosing this goal?
Number.
And I kind of stumble over, I guess, the improving parent access to
Yeah,
expectations.
well, we've talked about that actually at community outreach. This is one of the things that came up at the time that you did the forums in June. And at that time, we also talked a little bit about it at the meeting that we had in the summer, the what we call retreat that we have annually with administrators. And I think I committed to you at that time that this was something, there were a lot of things that came up at those forums that were just topics that needed exploration, answers to questions and so on, but this was one that I thought we could take on as a group of administrators, and so that's where it came from.
Is your question, Kay, more about what expectations means?
Well, yeah, whose expectations? Is it the parents' expectations,
Well,
teacher
no,
expectations?
okay, maybe that
So
could
that's
be
where I
worded
was
differently.
stumbling first of all over
It's
that.
the parents' be awareness about what is expected for student performance during the year. What are the topics we're going to cover? What are the main areas of focus? What are the long-term projects and so on? Often, those kinds of things have been expressed to us by parents saying, we want to be able to get the assignments, for example, all in one place. If I have 3 children, I don't want to have to go all over the place to get assignments. Or if my child has 5 teachers and each one has a different kind of web page that they offer, then I want something that is a more accessible way for me to get information about what the students are expected to do and be able to perform, and then specifically on more of a day-to-day basis on what is the homework.
So it's more than just having one system, such as X2, instead of having
Well, it could
Edmodo
be,
and.
we could do this through X2.
Yeah, I'm not saying
So,
to
yeah.
do that, but having that one, but it's broader than that, broader than just a technology vehicle. It's also parents' expectations for if they wanted to see a test or are we just talking about
I'm
the
talking mainly about
technology
being aware of
access?
what the learning goals are.
Okay.
And then what kids are expected to be able to do, so parents can maintain some sort of ability to monitor that.
Okay. So one of the things on this goal that on the action steps that I thought would be helpful of adding a item of parent and student feedback. So once you get through the work with the staff, then to share draft with parents and maybe even students, and then to inform the final input.
Right.
Make sure you're
Sure.
on the right track.
Yeah,
And then,
and what we may find actually is that parents may like this and maybe not the students.
right,
Or
or
vice
even,
versa.
or
Because
the
the students
staff
are
may
pretty-
have a different.
Because the students are pretty facile
Yeah.
about getting through
Yeah.
all of this
Yeah, I
stuff.
mean, everybody
so.
has to understand, we all have to have consensus that we all agree on the path forward, so.
Sorry. Could this goal possibly also incorporate how you're planning on working with the community, with overall communication, with some of those forums that you're planning to do with the PTOs? Maybe include that in this piece of it? Because you're
We
planning to
could.
do a lot of, I think you're planning to do a few community forums with folks similar to the kindergarten forum, so, I mean, since you've already started doing that work and are committed to.
Well, and that actually was, I don't want to say we can't do it here, but that was another of the goals that we talked about implementing. That was providing more information to parents about what things are on their mind and doing it in-person things. So that is something we have planned anyway. I mean, the kindergarten thing is one thing. Actually, something I should have mentioned earlier under good news is that the All-Town PTO has kind of branched out this year in that, in addition to coming to the monthly meetings with me, which is a two-way sharing kind of activity, the presidents of each of those PTOs, they've been meeting together separately. And quite honestly, some of their discussion has been around finding better ways to share information than having it be shared solely on social media, which seems to be the case for some topics. And so they've come up with a notion of having an all-town kind of forum. We've actually got 3 dates that they've talked about with the principals that we have to select from, and they're the last 2 Wednesdays in January and the first Wednesday in February. We'll pick one of those dates and have a forum that will be moderated, in a sense, by then, that will have principals and central office there, and people will be able to identify in advance some particular topics that they would like to hear discussed. And so I would look upon that as a model for future. Certainly one forum isn't going to answer all of the questions that people have. But to have a series of these kinds of forums is something else that is already in process. So, we could sort of merge that here, but that's already in process, and it's being sponsored by the all-town PTO, at least the group of principals presidents that all work together on that. And that's a goal, separate kind of goal, and that notion of, let's get together and talk about things. Let's have an opportunity that parents can hear from the people who are running some of these programs or not, what parents think, what they want to know, and let's not leave every kind of discussion simply to happen on social media. So certainly I supported that. The principals were right on target with that, and so we'll do this first one, but I would foresee, if it's successful, that's a much better way for us to communicate about things where we're having some knowledge of the facts first should precede discussion. So that's going to happen.
Carlos?
Go ahead.
No, please, go ahead.
I was wondering if there was any room, either on number 3 or other item, to add perhaps the creation of a task force between you, Dr. Gallo, the leadership at the high school and middle school. You're doing a good job in communicating what's going on in terms of lately vaping and so on. I was wondering if there was any way we can create a task force to address that more in depth, because it's becoming a major problem. So could you see that including a bullet there on number 3 perhaps?
I guess I'm not understanding that. So we are creating a task force
To address the substance
to address that
abuse.
goal.
Yes.
So tell me what you'd like to add to that again.
To address specifically substance abuse in a collective manner versus just, the high school having one message, the middle school having another. This would come from the district-wide, collectively.
It is intended to be district-wide.
Correct.
Can I say something to that? So, I think there's 2 topics here, but I think you're bringing up a really good topic. First one I think I'm having problems with is improving parent access.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think the key is improving communications. Because sometimes parents may have access, or maybe that's even part of the solution. Improving communication might be giving parents certain access to information. So that's, I think also piggybacks a little bit off of what Michelle was saying about communications, because it has been an issue. It's been wonderful to see, and I do want to say, wonderful to see some of the emails coming out, your email recently and Rick Swanson's. I really think they've been so enlightening to parents, which is, I think, why also Carlos is bringing up the topic of some of the issues we're seeing in our district. And maybe, I hate to add another goal. I don't know if we can include that in this goal, but I do think we need as a district to look at what's going on in our schools. And I know we're going to talk about the resolution on marijuana, which I think couldn't be a better time because it's frightening, it's alarming. There's, Boston Globe has some articles on the front page about what's going on in the high schools, not just in Hingham, but in all of Massachusetts. And obviously, we are not doing enough. I don't know what can be done. I don't know if it's creating a task force or getting more speakers or what, but we certainly have to address these issues because I think it's scary for a lot of parents out there. We've always been talking about all the screen time and all the phone activity our kids have, but right now I'm hearing e-cigarettes, vaping, juuling. So I think that's why Carlos is bringing it up, because just in the last month we've had a lot of communication about it.
And I'm not bringing that up because we're not doing enough. I believe the leadership is actually doing a very good job in handling and working with the authorities. But my main point is, what can we do better to, bring more awareness to the parents, get parents more involved, because it seems that they are in denial that this is taking place here. So we need to speak a little more about it.
And it's not just the juuling and vaping, but we're also hearing about this kind of the bullying and comments being made that can be very toxic. And, is there something we can do as a district, not just as a high school or an elementary school?
But don't you think that's something we have to do as a community?
Yes,
I mean, we are a microcosm, right? The school district is a microcosm of the community in which we exist, and I think that you're all right. You're on point, right? But how is it? Aren't we partners in that? Why are we having? So I mean, it probably makes sense to talk about a community-wide task force made up of clergy and school and town officials, because it's to put it on the schools as if something is occurring that's sort of we are the organization that takes the students, right, and educates and sort of and works to grow and grow skill. And I think that we were talking about earlier with Michelle that the sort of the behaviors that we're seeing are also prevalent in our community outside of the four walls of our classrooms, and so we have control over the 6.5 hours per day the kids are with us. But that's it. And I think, I'm not dismissing the point, I think they're excellent points, but I think it probably makes more sense to have a community-wide task force that's involving sort of all of the leaders in the community to talk about these issues together. Because us talking about an isolation is really one piece of a bigger puzzle. So I think I would fully support that kind of work, but I don't know that we can do it alone. Us in isolation. You're absolutely right, though.
Bringing it up is so obviously someone has to lead, and our leader, Dr. Gallo, embracing that and bringing the other
Well, I do embrace
entities.
it, and I think there are things going on individually in the schools. There are people that are interested. So I don't think it belongs with this goal.
Sure.
I think it needs
That's
to be
my
a
question,
separate
yeah.
goal. And so I had thought in our discussions that this goal was something that was very important to members of the school committee. But the other goal certainly is much more immediate. And so I'll say, what is it you say sometimes? We can do everything, but not just all at the same time.
We can do anything, we just can't do everything.
Right. We can.
But you're absolutely right.
And I'll pledge
It's a bigger
to be one
conversation
of
just
the
us.
individuals helping out on that.
Well, I maybe on that, maybe when we get to the next agenda item, we include something in that resolution about, the schools being part of a community-wide effort on this, as opposed to making it a specific
Yeah, I was gonna
task
say,
goal here.
probably too specific for
Yeah.
this particular goal. My thought was that if you included in here improving access and communication, since you're already doing a lot of that work with improving communications as we've been seeing recently, I mean, my opinion is if you're doing the work, you might as well be getting credit for it.
Yeah.
So if it's something you're already started doing and committed to doing, incorporate that into that goal.
I think it'd be clearer too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're improving the access by improving the communication.
So can I make a suggestion? Since I'd like to vote on this at the next meeting, maybe both of you could work with Dr. Gallo to clarify, since you are on community outreach, or schedule a community outreach subcommittee meeting, since this is a related goal to your work, to clarify and make it relevant, to make sure you have the intent of what Dr. Gallo had in mind, and then we can clarify it for the next meeting without making it too onerous of a goal. We want to make sure.
I just think it's a separate goal in itself. It's that big, so.
And I agree. I think they are two different topics, and I'm glad to see this goal, and that's why I kind of want to have some more of the background information. And I think just a bit of tweaking, we can get it. So we all agree?
Yeah. Okay. Great.
As far as the special education goal, what's the best way, from CPAC's perspective, to give the committee feedback on? I mean, we haven't seen the action steps, but what would be the right process to do that?
We can go over that. I mean, I can work with you on that, as on special ed subcommittee. We can definitely do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, 6.5, to receive and discuss a proposed resolution for the town to ban recreational marijuana establishments and act as appropriate. So at our last meeting, under 48 hours, because the planning board had reached out to the community to get additional input on the bylaws that they're considering for town meeting, we had talked about the idea of commenting to the planning board. So Kay and Ed drafted a resolution for us to consider as a statement to just share with the planning board of our views collectively as a board on what they're considering for the potential zoning bylaw changes at town meeting. So Kay, do you want to take us through?
Yes, so when I started to draft this, I basically took from our policy book the mission statement of the Hingham Public Schools, and that's where I started with the first and the second line. So it reads, whereas the mission of the Hingham Public Schools is to provide challenging and comprehensive educational programs in a safe and supportive environment. And to me, those were the two key words. We're already seeing in our schools what's going on with the e-cigarettes, juuling, and vaping. And if we have easier access to marijuana, I'm sure that will be I think it could be fairly easily said that we might start seeing that too, being vaped and smoked in our schools. Maybe not, let's hope, but so then the next line I also took from our policy manual, which reads, whereas in partnership with families and the community, which comes back to you, Jamie, it is in partnership with families and community. The Hingham Public Schools strive to develop in students habits of physical and emotional well-being, including a spirit of self-worth, resiliency, and adaptability. The next two lines I kind of took from Hingham Cares, and Ed and I both agreed that their message really is about access, having easier access to legalized marijuana, and the message that we're giving to our kids. So the next line reads, whereas providing easier access to mind-altering drugs such as marijuana within the Hingham community will result in higher use among adolescents. Fourth, whereas the legalization of marijuana sends a false message to adolescents that use marijuana is safe and acceptable. And then lastly, Hingham did vote against the legalization of marijuana, so we are considered a no community, so I think that is important to mention. So therefore, let it be resolved that the Hingham School Committee supports a full ban on marijuana establishments in the town of Hingham in order to ensure the safety and well-being of our youngest community members and students. And I think it's important also to mention that marijuana establishments could mean whether you buy it and you take it home and smoke it, whether you go into a coffee shop and smoke it there, or whether it's maybe even being grown somewhere. So it's apparently a broad term, what marijuana establishment means. So we may not have a coffee shop per se in Hingham, but maybe someone could grow it and sell it on Hingham.
Or buy
soil.
equipment that's related to
Or they sell exactly
use.
accessories in order to smoke marijuana. Lastly, therefore, let it be resolved that the Hingham School Committee calls on the Planning Board to propose that a ban on all recreational marijuana establishments be put in place prior to the expiration, which is June 30th, 2018, of the existing temporary moratorium. And I struggled a little bit, and I wanted to ask you tonight, should we be using the term recreational? Because there is also medicinal marijuana. Medicinal, thank you. Marijuana, so really we're talking though about recreational.
Non-medical.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that needs to be then included. I kind of included it towards the end, so I wanted to get some feedback too.
Non-medicinal personal use?
Well, isn't what the planning board looking at, aren't they talking about recreational marijuana?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I think you could put it in the paragraph above too. Supports a full ban on recreational marijuana
Yeah.
establishments. I think you'd have to put it there as well. Because if it was
Let me pull this up.
one of the ones that's, you have to go in with a prescription, that's different. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about one where you can literally just, anybody can go in and get something.
So let it be resolved that the Hingham School Committee supports a full ban on recreational.
And then the only other comment I had is up above. I don't really think we can say whereas providing easier access to mind-altering drugs such as marijuana within the Hingham community will result in higher use. We can't say that. I mean, yeah, we all think
May
it,
result.
but I don't think we can actually
Could.
say will, because that sounds like we know something that we simply don't have the capacity to know.
Is it could or may? Well,
We could say may, or could, but I think will is a little beyond our area of expertise, so to speak.
Michelle, did you want to see?
I was gonna make the same comment. I was also even wondering, does it need the word easier access, or could it just be providing access to mind-altering drugs such as marijuana within? Or local access, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, if it is local, it is kind of easier to get your hands on,
yes.
so.
I guess what I'm thinking is, we're against any access to it versus easy, whether it's easy or hard. We don't really want them to have any access to it. So I would just say maybe we could just get rid of easier. And there's one little typo, sorry, in the therefore, let it be resolved in order to ensure.
In the last sentence.
Yep. And then my only other comment was, I think I would take the quotes out of safe and supportive.
That's fine.
Do you need the percentage there of the voters? I don't think you do.
You could just say a majority, but
I think somewhere in here needs to be the word retail, because that's the focus of the planning board's efforts
Maybe
in
it's
terms
retail
of things
versus
like
recreation.
zoning,
Maybe that's the word we
locating.
need to be using.
We're talking about retail.
Or maybe it's a combination, retail, recreational
Recreational, yeah.
marijuana. I think that actually would be the most accurate.
Okay.
Because again, just saying retail, even people going in to get prescriptions, it's still technically retail.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't want to just say retail.
Now, my other question is, the planning board has 2 bylaws. Do we want to say that in the event that we would support the second bylaw in the event the first bylaw fails? Do we want to add that to this? So they're considering 2 bylaws, so that if town meeting doesn't vote to support the full ban, that then there's a second warrant article that is to support a zoning,
Location.
or
Overlay.
zoning overlay of this. So do we want to reference that in this?
Will this only apply to the first one if we don't see anything?
I mean,
about the
yeah,
second
no,
one?
I mean, I guess theoretically no, but
If the one fails,
the first one fails. I mean, this is
Then
just,
this
for-
becomes
this
a-
is endorsing the planning board to make their decision, so I guess we don't need to reference it. Thinking it through.
Yes, Kate did it. Yeah, my only comment was, let's remove a few of the whereases and go for it.
it's not easy to write like
Yeah.
this when you're not
Yeah.
technically a lawyer.
Just an FYI, the Hingham Cares Group, which we may or may not talk about here in a moment or two, struggled with this at the last meeting that Dr. Gell and I attended. And FYI, there is a medicinal outlet in Hanover, Massachusetts.
Right next to Friendly's.
In the Assinippie, which people said it was Norwell. And it's under lock, stock, and barrel. There's a guard at the door. I went down there to scout it out, to be honest with you, and wouldn't let me in.
No,
You didn't have a prescription.
just-
No, no. No, I wanted to. No, I wanted to see what it was all about. You let me in.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Excuse me.
we're all good?
We good with that?
When's the
Okay.
meeting? Doesn't matter.
It's December 1st, or is it Monday?
Yes.
Monday, yep.
Yeah, they've got to get the
The,
deadline for the.
I believe the
articles. These are warrant
selectmen are
articles.
talking about it this week
They have a
Perhaps
meeting
even
tomorrow. I don't know
tomorrow.
if it's on their agenda.
on the agenda. I got an email late this afternoon from Mary Savage Dunham. I think she wanted some help in publicizing
Okay.
that.
Okay.
It's okay. So are we gonna leave the 58%, or should we take that out and just say the majority of Hingham residents?
I would leave the number in
If the
it.
numbers, if you're sure that number is the accurate number, I like using the number better.
I received
Yeah.
it from Hingham
I like
Cares,
that.
that was the number they gave me.
Maybe we
But
could,
if it's an error, are we better off than to?
Well, why don't we leave it in and we can check it in if we approve the motion with
maybe we could just reverse
confirming
the
number.
thoughts and start with Hingham is a no community because, so that it's really one thought rather than two distinct.
Oh, Hingham is a no community because the
Because of
residents
its
voted against.
68% vote.
Yeah. We can, yeah, I mean, I'm sure the numbers, right,
So, verified, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's my only concern. I don't want to be using a number that we're not
Yeah.
100% certain is accurate.
Well, the town clerk should know.
We can look it up. I could look it up right now. We really wanted to take 10 minutes, but how about we just, we'll confirm that.
So do you want me to read it through one more time so we can take a vote, or are we good, or?
No, I'm good.
With changes.
Yeah, we changed, so we took out the quotes. We took out easier. We changed will to may. And we added
retail.
recreational.
Retail recreation.
And, okay, so both places, it would be retail recreational.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that retail, okay,
Retail,
dash?
comma,
No,
recreational.
comma.
Okay, oops. I see how you did it, okay.
Oh, and add the typo in order to ensure.
Mm-hmm.
Looks good to me.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion to accept the resolution of the Hingham School Committee relating to marijuana zoning by the planning board as presented and amended.
Okay.
You could second.
Oh, you second.
Okay.
No, I'm not gonna second my own resolution.
Second.
Okay.
Sure.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so, I'll help Kay get it on letterhead. We'll add the as voted by, and we'll get that to the planning board, tomorrow, so that they have it for their meeting on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right. Then 6.6, to consider the homeschool application of Hayden and Pierce Bromley from January through June 2018. Excuse me.
This is a new request for homeschooling, and it's actually because a family is going to be taking a trip for the entire second semester, and typically when students would be absent for a period of time, extensive period of time, such as we've had in the past, students who may go to a ski school for the entire winter, or to I remember at one point we had a horse, what is the sport? Equestrian camp or equestrian experience for the entire winter. We do recommend that they withdraw, put forth a homeschooling plan, and then re-enroll when they return. That prevents them from having a record of poor attendance, and it assists us because certainly things like MCAS are dependent upon an attendance figure. So this is consistent with how we handle long-term absences as opposed to homeschooling for some other reason that a parent may choose. So.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I will make a motion that we approve the homeschool application of Hayden Bromley grade 9 and Pierce Bromley grade 8 for the period January through June of 2018 as set forth in the application for home education presented to us in our packets.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. 6.7, to receive notification of the overnight field trip of high school French students to Montreal on March 15th to 17th, 2018.
And I would just differentiate here, this is for French students, and it is a high school field trip, not to be confused with the trips that 8th graders have typically taken in the spring each year at the middle school, and those trips have gone to Quebec. I would also point out that as the Global Citizenship Club and diploma program have progressed, we've been challenged to find ways for students to access travel that isn't as costly as some of the trips to Europe. So, you know, to stay in North America is a much more reasonable thing to do cost-wise, and therefore makes that experience more accessible to more kids, so.
Just logistically, maybe right, the top of this form says no field trips in March. So I'm assuming it's okay for sophomores specifically.
Yeah, we did talk about
Okay.
it after MCAS.
Okay, so they're good.
We thought the time was just in a window that we thought would be least disruptive.
And also
Okay.
not to get so close to graduation and.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great to have a short trip opportunity for high school students. That's good. Okay, 6.8, to receive notification of the appointment of Amanda Harding, special education teacher at South School, Kathleen Koenen and Ashley Elliott, Title I math tutors at Hingham Middle School, and Deborah Fasl, a bus driver, effective November 13th. Welcome. And then 7 other items not reasonably known,
I don't
48
have
hours.
any,
Nothing?
other than the executive.
Yeah. Subcommittee and project reports.
Actually, nothing has changed for salary and negotiations since the last time, but we do have a meeting scheduled for the week after Thanksgiving. I don't remember the date off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I think it's the Thursday from 6 to 7:30 p.m.
Policy update from our meeting on the 16th. There was the, I attended both of the entrance age forums on the 13th and 15th. Kay and Michelle were each at one. Probably 40 people in attendance on the 13th and maybe 50 on the 16th. That was a rough guess. You guys can, those of you who are there, can correct me if I'm wrong. When we met on the 16th, we discussed the feedback from both the emails that we received, conversations we've had, what we heard in the forums, the feedback from the principals, the administrators, and one of the things that really stood out was the fact that none of the elementary school principals recommended that at this time a policy change be made. So Dr. Gallo recommended that no substantive change be made at this time, and that steps be taken, as she's been mentioning all evening, to make more of an effort to disseminate information to parents, to educate parents as to what kindergarten readiness looks like, to help with just the whole kindergarten enrollment process, and making parents aware that if they have questions, they can come to the Hingham Public Schools. So she also recommended that we modify the current practice by, in those outreach, making it clear that we expect typically developing students to enroll in the first year in which they are age eligible, which for most is 5. To encourage parents, again, who have specific concerns, to reach out to the principal in their district. And all the principals at all the forums said they'd be more than happy to have those conversations. So after taking all that into consideration, we decided not to recommend a policy change at this time. And we will, however, we will be taking a look at the wording of the policy to make it more clear that we expect students to enroll at the earliest possible age, and that if there are questions, parents should reach out. So we've asked Dr. Gallo and the administration to keep an eye, as possible, on any effects that this has over the next, hopefully, enrollment year. And if any changes are needed in the future, we can revisit. So all of the emails that we've received are in that packet if anyone wants to look at them. You may not have received all of them. Okay, that was the bulk of our meeting on Thursday.
Great.
You have a question. Is the school committee open to discussing that topic again next year and kind of the enrollment patterns, or in the coming years?
We're always open to discussion. Yeah.
I mean, is that an intention, or just? Yeah, I think. Okay.
We're going to keep an eye on it, sure, but.
We asked the school department to keep an eye on what the trend is in this next enrollment period, and if we see, do we see now, the numbers have dropped and it's more in line with what our other benchmark towns are doing, then we could go back and revisit it.
But again, I mean, the conversation needs to start with the administration because they're the ones who are seeing it on the front lines. So, you know, we're certainly happy to talk, but we're always going to roll it back and ask them what they see and, you know, look at benchmark communities, but, you know, we're not trying to be benchmark communities. We're trying to be Hingham and do what we think is right for our students. So.
Yeah, and I think we definitely listen to the parents, and we're listening and we're making effort. So we're not ignoring the situation. I hope you definitely hear that from us. There's also the distinction of the way the specific policy is written doesn't necessarily apply to what happened, and so it more is a change of practice as opposed to specific policy, which I know I didn't understand until I became a school committee member, but I think you heard a couple times tonight that we are looking at it, we're addressing it, we've definitely heard what parents have said, and you know, we'll stay on it too. I encourage parents, send your kids to kindergarten as soon as you can.
I do too.
Save your money for that preschool, put it in a college fund. You're going to get a lot more value out of your life of being able to pay for college. But, you know, for those kids that they need that extra year preschool, that's perfectly fine too. But I have college kids. I sent them as soon as I could send them, and was glad not to have to pay preschool money, but then was enlightened that, oh, there's a lot of other expenses. No, I thought I was done. Like, great, I'll save the money. No, it keeps spending it. So, okay. Then.
Who's on the policy committee? I'm just curious. Who?
Aileen, me, and Kay.
And Aileen, did you go to a meeting?
The forums?
Yeah.
No, I couldn't make either of them.
Okay.
But I read all the emails
Okay.
and heard back. I mean, you know, there were people on both sides, and I'm sure
Yeah,
at the
no,
forum
I
there were
just
people
wanted
on
to
both
be
sides.
clear of who's on these subcommittees and who's making these decisions. And that's important for the residents to know. So that's all. Thank you.
I believe all of our subcommittee assignments are on the website page.
I know
listed.
when Cynthia mentioned who had the discussion about it, she didn't mention Aileen, so I just wanted to be
Okay.
sure that the policy subcommittee person was in on that conversation.
Yes, I was at the, excuse me, I couldn't make the meetings because of work, and then another town board I sit on was on the Wednesday night.
trust you. You
But I
don't
was there
have
at the
to be a
policy
schedule. I
subcommittee
just
meeting, yes.
wanted to make sure you weren't on it. Thanks.
Long-range planning?
Long-range
Or
planning
school
met
building?
on the 8th of November. And the bulk of the meetings was working on looking at the capital budget for the next year, as well as a discussion about the master plan. I went to the MIAA Eastern State Cross-Country Championships that Emma alluded to in Rentham on the Saturday the 11th. Went to the Hingham Cares meeting on Monday, November 13th, and they're struggling and struggled with the marijuana issue as well. Attended the STAT meeting on the 14th, working on fundraising and their charitable group, very, very nice group, happy to be there. To pick up on what Emma mentioned, and I went to the MIA All-State Finals in Rentham the following Saturday, and both Jackie and Caroline did very, very well. And just a quick reminder, this Wednesday night, the 22nd, 7:45 at Fenway Park. I didn't realize this. When I bought the ticket, there's two games, so you can't go too early. You'll catch a game when you're waiting for the Hingham game.
You're a little sports announcer.
Say again?
You're a sports announcer.
Okay, anything with community
Nothing to
outreach?
report from the community outreach, other than we have a meeting on November 28th at 11:15.
Okay. And then on special ed, I attended the CPAC meeting, and we met Officer Dan Murphy, who is the new newly appointed special needs police officer. Is that the specific term for his? Yeah. And so one of the things that he started with the relationship with SNAP, but has broadened his role, and they are establishing form that anyone in the community with special needs can fill out, so the police are aware of who those people are, and so that, and it's for all ages. This is not just school children. And we even brought up with him, what if someone has dementia or other types of needs, to fill that out so that when they are going to an incident, they can get that information from their database and understand what they're doing. And he was very open to more suggestions, and it was very well received. And it's a good relationship with that community. So that's a positive. And then they also received the 504 plan presentation, and that went over well. So that was the latest on CPAC. And I attended the Play Chicago this weekend. Very good job.
I was there.
Excellent singers. And it was very nice in the chorus to see the wide variety of students who were involved with the play, including some of the special needs students, and all ages, shapes, sizes, all belting it out, and really great production. So I applaud not only the talented students, but the staff of including so many, and I know that adds to the production, but it was really wonderful to see everyone in the Hingham community involved with the show. So.
To add, the band was fantastic.
Yes, yeah.
Unbelievable.
So, okay, so we have adjournment to executive session, not to return to open session. I'll read it. For the purposes of approving minutes of the executive session of the school committee held on October 23rd, approving minutes of the executive session of the school committee held on November 6th, and discussing collective bargaining, and the memorandum of agreement for the para-educators, HEA Unit B, and discussing collective bargaining with the custodians and maintenance workers of association, the public discussions of which may be detrimental to the committee's bargaining position. So, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. And roll call vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.